Good evening. Tonight you wake with Remus and Romulus on the hills above the Tiber in 753 BCE, where wild thyme and river mud ride the cold air above wattle and daub shelters and amber hearths, and where the most famous city in history begins with two brothers preparing to let birds settle a property dispute. I am glad you are here again, Hannah in Brooklyn and Callum in Yorkshire, because you both commented on the last video and stayed until the end. Tell me where you are and what time it is for you, just like Hannah and Callum did, and if you would like and subscribe, you can drift off with me more easily every episode. Have you ever watched two people make a very large plan before breakfast and known in your bones that somebody sensible will soon ask about water? The hill takes you in before you can think too much. You smell damp grass under the woolen blanket, warm ash from the rough stone hearth, and the sharp clean touch of thyme bruised under many sandals. Beside the fire, Faustulus is already kneeling in the dark, packing his leather satchel and muttering about cloaks, bread, blisters, and the alarming confidence of young men. You do not wake all at once. You come back in parts. First the cold at your nose, then the weight of the blanket on your shoulder, then the soft red pulse of the hearth through your closed eyes. When you open them, the sky is still only thinking about becoming blue. A few stars hold on above the ridge. The lower ground is full of river mist. The scrub below the camp gives out the first thin bird song of morning. Your blanket is rough and warm at the same time. It smells of sheep and smoke and last night's grass. One corner is damp with dew. Your heel finds a patch of bare earth that kept the day's heat longer than the rest. Around you, other sleepers are already becoming people again. A man coughs into his elbow. A dog turns twice and sighs. Somebody fumbles for a sandal with the solemn care of a person performing a sacred rite before sunrise, though it is only footwear. You push yourself up on one hand. The grass clings to your arm. The air catches inside your tunic. For one easy moment, you hope the day might contain only bread, sheep, and the usual work of keeping both in roughly the same place. Then you remember which brothers you follow. That hopeful thought goes away quietly. You have followed them since the Alban Hills, which now feels like another life, and also exactly last week. With the twins, years have a way of folding together. A quiet afternoon can vanish. A single idea can somehow become a camp, a quarrel, a feast, and a very long walk before sunset. You know their stride in half-light. You know the shape of their heads when they are arguing, even from behind. You know that when one goes still and looks at a hill, the other soon looks at the same hill and decides it ought to belong to him instead. You know, too, that people gather around them the way birds gather on a cloak. First one man with nowhere good to sleep, then another with a bad master, then a shepherd between flocks, then a wanderer who says very little and eats gratefully. That is how this whole band forms over the years. You are shepherds and runaways, and workers who left in the night. You are stray cousins and useful hands, and men who would rather not explain where they were last month. You are people who do not fit neatly anywhere else. It suits the twins strangely well. They never ask for a polished story. They do not seem troubled by rough edges. If you can walk, lift, mend, watch a herd, or laugh at the right time, there is usually room near the fire. The fire this morning is low and steady. It glows in a stone ring with a deep orange heart. Ash has gathered at the edges like pale flour. A blackened pot still leans near one side, and last night's barley paste clings to it with the loyalty of old mortar. Faustulus is the only person fully awake in the camp. This does not surprise you. He sleeps like a man who expects nonsense and wants a head start. Even now, his face has the patient look of someone who has been waiting for trouble since two infants first arrived in his arms. He is packing as if the day intends to invent new kinds of difficulty. Into the leather satchel goes a heel of bread, then a wrapped piece of cheese, then a bone needle, a little spool of thread, and a strip of cured meat no one is supposed to know about. He pauses to inspect a thong of leather. It will snap, he says to nobody and everybody. Not now, at the steep part. Then he puts it in anyway. You have heard this tone before. It is not panic. Faustulus does not waste energy on panic. It is a kind of tired prophecy, delivered by a man who has been proved right so often that he no longer needs the pleasure of saying so. He reaches for his flask and sniffs it. Half full, he says, which means empty. Once somebody with a grand idea notices thirst, he He tucks it inside the satchel with the care of a priest handling a sacred object. A hand appears from under a nearby blanket. Without even looking, Faustulus presses a piece of bread into it. The hand takes the bread and withdraws. He nods, as if another crisis has been handled for now. That is his way. He predicts disaster at every step. He also makes sure everyone has eaten and has a warm cloak. If the world ends before noon, you suspect he will still ask whether you have enough socks. Across the camp, a shelter of woven branches and packed mud darkens the slope. Its walls are cracked in places. Its roof sags politely. A thin thread of smoke escapes from one side, because Acca Laurentia has also woken and has already decided that coals should not be wasted. You hear her before you see her. Who took the water jar yesterday? It is not asked like a question. No one answers at once. This is wise. Acca knows who took the jar. Acca usually knows who took everything. She is merely giving the guilty person a chance to discover honesty before breakfast. You have long since learned that the twins may inspire loyalty, wonder, and stories. Acca inspires people to rinse pots properly. In daily life, this is often more useful. She steps out with her shawl around her shoulders. Her hair is pinned quickly and firmly. Her eyes move over the camp in one sweep. She sees the low water level, the uneven pile of firewood, and the sleeping shape of a man who forgot to cover his feet. That one will complain by evening, she says. She nods at the exposed feet. Then she bends, pulls a spare scrap of wool over them, and straightens again without ceremony. Tenderness, with Acca, usually arrives disguised as criticism. You like this about her. Everyone likes this about her, though not everyone says so aloud. The twins owe her more than they ever quite managed to explain. People say many things about their beginning, and most of them are true enough for a morning story. They say the twins are the grandsons of the king of Alba Longa. They say they are born into a house where crowns pass through family, and family passes through trouble. They say power notices babies long before babies notice power. You know the older version that lives by the fire. You know how the infants are set out to die and do not. You know the river takes them, then spares them. You know a she-wolf gives them milk, as if this were the most ordinary arrangement in Latium. Faustulus finds them after that. He never tells it the same way twice. Some mornings he says he hears crying first. Some mornings he says he sees birds circling. Once he says he simply rounds a bend and there they are, as if the countryside has decided to hand him a problem. Acca raises them because of course she does. Someone has to wash them and feed them and stop them crawling into fires. Divine signs are all very well, but babies still need swaddling and destiny still needs porridge. Faustulus glances toward the brothers now and snorts softly. Well, he says, tying off the satchel, they were raised by a wolf. This explains everything and nothing. It is his answer to every mystery. Why do they walk toward danger with bright eyes? Why do they collect followers like burrs? Why do they think a valley can become a city? Because morning feels promising. The twins are awake now. You see Romulus first by the firelight. He is standing with his hands on his hips, looking down the slope as if the land has already agreed with him. A few paces away, Remus is watching the opposite ridge with the same expression. It is impossible not to notice the likeness. The same shoulders, the same quick turn of the head, the same look of cheerful certainty that would be charming in a child and mildly exhausting in a grown man. Yet you know them apart at once. You always do. Romulus carries stillness like a tool. He lets silence gather around his thoughts. Remus moves faster in word and gesture, with the easy spark of a man who likes his wit warm and ready. They have led this ragged band from hill to hill for years. You have trailed sheep over dry ground behind them. You have crossed stream beds with them in spring. You have slept under trees, under carts, under clouds, and once under a roof that had 3 walls and called itself a house. The band changes as the roads change. Some leave when work turns up elsewhere. Some arrive because they hear the twins are gathering people. Some stay because no one here asks too many questions about old troubles, so long as you pull your weight and do not steal the stew. There is comfort in a camp like this. Not luxury, never that, but comfort, yes. You know who's snoring to expect. You know who saves onion skins for the pot. You know which dog steals only from strangers, and which one steals with admirable fairness. The sky lightens one shade, then another. A line of pale gray forms over the farther ridge. The mist in the valley shifts and thins. Somewhere below, the Tiber moves through reeds and banks and mud, with the patient sound of a great thing minding its own business. You breathe in and taste the river on the air. There is mud in it and wet stone. There is thyme from the slope and smoke from the camp. There is also the animal warmth of sleeping sheep, which is not elegant, but is certainly real. Someone feeds the fire a split branch. Amber rises brighter across the rough stones. Hands extend toward it from blankets. The camp begins to make its small morning noises, each one humble and familiar. A pot is set down. A strap is pulled through a buckle. A boy shakes burrs from a cloak. A woman wraps her hair and squints eastward, as if sunrise might respond better to supervision. Faustulus stands with a grunt and slings the satchel over his shoulder. Then he takes it off again at once. I forgot the salt. He kneels, rummages and finds a tiny pouch. No city was ever improved by bland porridge, he says, and tucks it inside with grave approval. You smile before you can help it. With Faustulus, even doom comes seasoned. He notices you are awake and tosses you a crust. You catch it against your chest. It is hard at the edge and soft in the middle. It smells faintly of smoke and yesterday's grain, which is to say it smells perfect. Eat, he tells you. History is hungry work. That is far more grand than he usually sounds, and he knows it. He clicks his tongue as if annoyed with himself. Then he adds, also, if they start talking before you eat, you will be standing till midday with an empty stomach. This is the voice you trust, not because it is cheerful. It rarely is. You trust it because it has hauled lambs from ditches, mended sandals by moonlight, and found water where the ground looked hopeless. Across the camp, Titus is already up and trying to appear useful. He was closer to Remus yesterday. You remember that. Today he is standing where either brother might notice him. It is a talent of his, this ability to lean toward importance before importance has fully chosen a direction. He is a thick-necked man with a beard that always looks newly offended. He folds his arms and studies the hills as if he personally invented them. If power were a fire, Titus would somehow manage to warm both hands without singeing either loyalty. You do not dislike him exactly. You simply never leave your cup unattended near him. Akka comes to the fire with a smaller bag and a larger opinion. If anyone is planning something foolish, she says, say it before I waste more lentils on breakfast. No one answers for a breath. Then both twins turn toward her at the same time. This alone tells you the morning is about to become interesting. Remus smiles first. Romulus smiles second, which somehow makes his smile more dangerous in practical matters, though neither of them would call it that. You will want the lentils, Remus says. And the jar, says Romulus. And more wood. Akka narrows her eyes. For what? Romulus looks over the valley again. He lifts one arm toward the hills and the river below, and for a moment even the sleepy men seem to wake from the inside. The gesture is simple. The idea inside it is not. Here, he says. Today, says Remus. You hear the camp become still. Not silent, never fully silent. A dog still scratches, a call still shifts, but the human sound draws in, like breath before a song. Romulus speaks plainly. They will found a city here, he says, on these hills above the river, starting this morning, before the day grows hot and before anyone can talk themselves out of what the land already seems to promise. Remus steps beside him and opens both hands to the valley. A crossing place, good ground above flood level, grazing nearby, roads that are not roads yet but soon could be, room for walls one day, and markets and homes and a name that will carry. He says it as if naming the shape already hidden inside the earth. Many around the fire want to believe him at once. You feel it yourself, that lift inside the chest. It is the old dangerous pleasure of hearing a rough place described as a future home. Even smoke-blackened pots seem briefly noble when someone says they belong to the beginning of something great. Titus nods so hard his beard nearly arrives first. A city, he says, as if he suggested it last month. Faustulus closes his eyes for one short moment. When he opens them, he has the expression of a man watching two boys bring a goat indoors and call it planning. A city, he repeats. He says it gently, but not because he is convinced. You can almost see the list moving through his head. Water supply, grain stores, roofs, tools, sickness, winter mud, boundary lines, arguments about sleeping places, arguments about grazing places, arguments about whose cousin gets the better patch of shade. Akka saves him some time. Which hill, she asks. There it is. The whole enormous dream reduced at once to the shape of actual ground under actual feet. It is such a useful question that you feel grateful before either brother answers. Romulus points to the Palatine. Remus points to the Aventine. Of course they do. You have seen less tension over stolen sheep than now passes in perfect brotherly calm between two outstretched hands. It is the oldest roommate dispute in the world. Which side gets the better view? The wardrobe problem will, in time, become slightly more serious. No one speaks for a few breaths. The birds in the scrub go on with their own concerns. The river mist lifts another little way. A sheep somewhere behind the shelters sneezes with excellent timing. Remus is first to laugh softly. It is only a hill, he says. Romulus answers with equal softness. It is the right hill. There are many ways to disagree. These two have practiced all of them since infancy. You remember them younger on the Alban slopes. One would jump the stream because the other said not to. One would climb the rock because the other claimed it slippery. If one said east, the other often found urgent reasons to admire west. Still, they have always moved like matched hands. One reaches, the other closes. One speaks, the other makes the speaking matter. You have never quite believed the stories that treat them as opposites. They are too alike for that. They are mirrors with different weather. The camp waits. A city sounds grand. A hill sounds immediate. Everyone senses that the larger dream has now narrowed to the exact patch of earth where sandals will stand. Faustulus rubs his forehead. Naturally, he says, we begin with choosing the place by not agreeing on the place. He looks at you and jerks his chin toward the brothers. Eat another bite. It will be a long morning. You obey. The bread cracks softly in your teeth. A crumb sticks at the corner of your mouth. Behind the practical act of chewing, your mind moves through old stories again, because this feels like one of those mornings when the past sits very close. You think of Alba Longa behind you in the hills. You think of kings and claims, and old family wrongs spoken around fires by people who enjoy telling matters above their station, especially when the high-born infants in the tale end up hungry and muddy like everyone else. Grandsons of a king. It still sounds strange when you place it beside their worn cloaks and sun-browned hands. Yet that strangeness follows them everywhere. They belong to shepherd tracks and royal stories at the same time. Perhaps that is why so many people follow them. A runaway hears that two brothers of uncertain fortune are making room for men of uncertain fortune. A wanderer hears there is food if he works. A shepherd hears there will be stronger pens and safer ground. Little by little, a band becomes a people before anyone names it. That is how mornings like this happen, not from nothing. They grow from many cold nights and many shared crusts and many miles of saying, stay with us a while and see what comes. Akka crosses her arms. If you are founding a city, she says, who has thought about drainage? No one answers quickly enough. That, she says, is what I thought. Even Remus smiles at that. Romulus almost smiles, which for him is nearly the same thing. The practical details begin to arrive around the fire like late guests. Where will the first huts stand? Which spring will serve? How far from the river is wise? Where do sheep go? Where do cooking fires go? Where, Akka adds, does waste go? Unless the new city wishes to perfume itself strangely by midsummer. You are impressed by how fast a dream acquires chores. It is almost soothing. Not enough to seem obvious, though obvious is one of Titus's stronger habits. He nods at every word about the Palatine with the eager gravity of a man preparing to remember that he always preferred this hill. Faustulus notices, because Faustulus notices everything. He says nothing. He only hands Titus a bundle of stakes to carry. This is his favorite answer to unnecessary enthusiasm. The sun is still not up, but dawn now has shape. You can see the edges of cloaks and jars. You can see the little paths worn between shelters. You can see how the camp sits on the hill, as if it has been trying on the land and wondering whether to stay. A lark rises from the scrub, then another. Remus watches them go and tips his head. You know that look. Romulus knows it too. Somewhere already, in both their minds, birds are moving from birds into signs. In truth, this whole matter is becoming something like the world's first reality contest. Two men on two hills, followers waiting for results. Everyone staring upward and refreshing nothing, because hands are empty and scrolling has not yet been invented. You find this quietly funny. So does fate, perhaps. But for now, the morning remains almost domestic. Someone adds water to the pot. Someone shares dried figs. A child too young to care about cities chases a dog around a stack of brushwood and is led away before either creature overturns the breakfast. Romulus crouches and draws a line in the dust with a stick. Remus crouches beside him and redraws part of it elsewhere. You watch their hands move over plain earth, making shapes that are not walls yet, not streets yet, and still somehow already both. Their voices stay calm. That may be the most alarming part. Faustulus shifts his satchel again and looks toward the paling east. Well, he says to no one in particular, if we are doing this, we need more water, more wood, and less genius before sunrise. Akka nods once. At last, on this hill above the Tiber, with time on the breeze and the river below, and a city not yet born, there is something wonderfully ordinary to do first, and you rise with your crust in hand to fetch the jar before the brothers decide the future on empty cups. You crouch by the morning fire while the last fat crackles in the ash, and the dark turns gently blue. Wild thyme and river mud drift on the breeze below, and birds begin their small arguments in the scrub. Behind you, wool blankets lie in loose heaps on the grass beside wattle and daub huts still warm from sleep. Rough stone hearths glow amber in doorways, and smoke hangs low as if it also needs another moment. You know this quiet hour from years on the Alban hills with the twins and their restless plans. Quiet never lasts long around them, though everyone keeps hoping breakfast might manage it today. That worry and kindness can live in the same pair of hands. He presses a heel of barley bread into your palm, then squints at the brothers like whether he distrusts. His face has the calm strain of a man who expected this trouble when they still fit in baskets. He mutters that nothing good starts before sunrise, then adds bread is no reason to starve. The first sharp words arrive before the fire has even given up its last little flame. Romulus points across the valley with greasy fingers and says that Palatine is the only sensible hill. You follow his hand and see the ridge rising clean against the pale east. It looks stern and useful with steeper sides, narrow ways up, and room enough for a watchful kind of town. Romulus speaks like a man already placing walls where only goats now pick their careful breakfast. From that height, he says you can see the valley floor, the tracks, the ford, and any visitor. He stamps his heel to show how firm the ground feels underfoot after the night damp. He likes the wind there, and the clean line of sight, and the feeling of being above matters. You can tell he loves the look of the place, almost as much as the use of it. The Palatine gives a broad view across the low ground, and men enjoy views with their future attached. Faustulus tears his bread in two and says high ground also means longer walks for water. Nobody answers him. That is often how wisdom is treated before the second meal. Remus wipes his hands on his tunic and turns toward the Aventine with patient annoyance. He speaks as if he cannot believe anyone would choose a handsome problem over a useful home. From where you stand, the Aventine spreads lower and broader beside the life of the river. Its slopes are kinder on ankles and baskets, and its flatter ground welcomes fields, pens, sheds, and gardens. Remus says grain does not care about splendid views, and neither do sheep with full bellies. He says men need paths that carts can manage, banks where boats can tie, and mud that promises food. He speaks for the Tiber as if the river is an older aunt with plain opinions. You smell its wet breath even here, and the morning mud below shines like dark worked leather. Romulus snorts, and says the river also brings strangers, damp and every wandering trader with a clever face. Remus shrugs and says strangers also bring salt, pots, news, and fish that are not imaginary. You sit back on your heels and chew slowly, while the hills themselves seem to wait. It is the oldest roommate argument in record, though the wardrobe issue will prove unusually severe. Around the fire, bowls pass from hand to hand, with yesterday's porridge warmed in goat milk. Someone drops in chopped leeks. Someone else adds a pinch of salt like a personal philosophy. The smell should make everyone kinder, but breakfast only gives the quarrel better strength. Men nod between mouthfuls. Then they glance at each twin to see which nod might be wiser. You watch loyalties move in tiny ways first, like smoke changing direction above damp wood. One man sits closer to Remus, another laughs a little louder at Romulus's dry remarks. Titus makes sure everyone notices him thinking. This is difficult because thinking is quieter than he prefers. He strokes his beard, frowns at the hills, and positions himself near Romulus's shoulder. He says height means safety, which he has always said, if anyone remembers correctly. No one remembers that. Titus remembers it for them, with great generosity toward his own past. Remus asks, with mild interest, why Titus yesterday praised river land and easy fields. Titus says that was before he heard the full argument. He says full arguments often improve his judgment. This lasts less than the time needed to swallow a mouthful of porridge. Romulus turns aside to speak to another man. Titus drifts 3 steps toward Remus, as if tugged by weather. Now Titus praises gentle slopes and fertile ground with a voice of deep conviction. He says strong cities need full store jars. He may have said the opposite while still chewing. Faustulus watches this performance with the blank patience of a man mending a fence in rain. He offers Titus another piece of bread anyway. Kindness for him is not a reward system. When Titus changes sides again, he does it audibly enough to startle a nearby dog. Romulus mentions walls once more. Titus says yes, walls exactly, that was his concern from the beginning. The dog looks at you, then at Titus, as if asking whether this is normal human behavior. You cannot answer honestly. You have known the twins too long to promise normal anything. Faustulus solves the silence by sighing through his nose and poking the fire with a stick. He says, well, they were raised by a wolf. He uses this for everything, and it helps nobody. Across the camp, women shake out blankets and slap dust from woven mats against stones. 2 boys chase a chicken that seems to understand politics better than either faction, and joins neither. You taste ashes on the bread crust and honey on the center where it stayed soft. Your fingers smell of smoke and milk. Morning work waits nearby, but no one pretends to notice. Acca Larentia stands at the edge of the circle with a water jar against her hip. She listens with that familiar look, which means she has already found the flaw and now regrets being right. She asks which hill has the better spring that lasts through late summer. She asks it once, she asks it clearly. The question lands like a spoon on wool, and then disappears. Romulus is still talking about sight lines and steep approaches for unwelcome guests. Remus is still talking about fields, pens, and the easy pull of the river path. Neither man says spring. Acca shifts the jar to her other hip and tries again, with more of the actual future included. She asks where the washing goes in winter rain. She asks where the waste goes. She asks who plans drainage. You feel a small hush pass through the group, because everyone knows she is correct in every detail. Then the hush breaks. Men return to arguing about glory and grain like boys choosing sleeping places. Faustulus gives her a look of married agreement and helpless surrender. He offers her bread too. She takes it without thanks, which is how long marriages often sound in the morning. You think about water because thirst is easier to picture than greatness. On the Palatine, jars must travel farther uphill. On the Aventine, the river lies close, though close things also flood and stink. No one thanks you for thinking such useful thoughts, so you keep them to yourself. This seems wisest. Practical ideas have a way of arriving dressed too plainly for heroic company. The sun lifts enough to silver the grass tips and find every grease mark on every bowl. A fly circles the porridge. A man wipes his spoon on his knee and declares the Palatine nobler. Another man says nobility does not fill a store pit before winter. He favors the Aventine. Then he notices Romulus hearing him and coughs as if he meant both hills equally. This is how the band divides, not with speeches alone. It happens through glances, bowl sharing, seat shifting, and the soft mathematics of who stands near whom. You see old friendships stretch like damp leather between the 2 names. Men who once slept head to foot now leave a blanket's width between them. Even the dogs sort themselves by scraps and tone. A straight vote would settle things quickly, and everyone knows it would settle other things forever. Half the camp would feel chosen against. The other half would act chosen for. No one says the word break, though you can almost hear it lying under the talk. A split band means separate fires, separate flocks, and separate futures. It also means very awkward borrowing of tools. Titus senses danger in being wrong too early, which is his strongest gift after volume. He steps back from both brothers and announces he supports whatever preserves unity. He says this while edging toward Romulus again. Remus notices and smiles the tired smile of a man watching a goat reach for 2 herbs. Romulus notices and says nothing, which is sometimes the more welcoming answer. Titus takes silence as a blessing. You rise to stretch your legs and walk a little way toward the slope. From there, both hills make a case without speaking. One stands tall and stern, one opens wide and useful. The Palatine catches the new light first, and its crest glows dry and clear. You imagine a lookout there with a cloak pulled tight. You imagine seeing the whole valley wake at once. The Aventine answers with breadth rather than height. You imagine plots marked with stones, children carrying water, and boats scraping softly at the bank. You imagine dinners arriving more easily than on proud ridges. When you return, Romulus is tracing lines in the dirt with a charred stick. He marks approaches and narrow points. He talks of gates that can be watched and paths that can be held. He is convincing in the way builders are convincing, even before they own stones. You can almost see posts, ditches, and smoke rising from ordered hearths. A height like that makes planning feel real. Remus kneels beside the same drawing and smooths half of it flat with his palm. He redraws broader spaces. He marks grazing, gardens, and easy roads down to the river shallows. He is convincing too, because hunger is a better tutor than pride. You can almost smell onions hanging to dry and hear a millstone turning. Flat land lets ordinary days happen with less complaint. The followers lean in as if dirt lines might spare them from choosing men. They nod at one drawing, then the other. Their faces show the painful wish for both hills at once. Akka looks down at the sketches and asks where the drains run after heavy rain. She asks it to the dirt, because the men are not worth the effort just then. The dirt keeps her confidence. Faustulus rubs his beard and says maybe the gods should choose if sons cannot manage breakfast. It sounds like a joke until nobody laughs. Then it sounds like a plan with smoke on it. Romulus straightens first, because he likes any stage with sky above it. Remus pauses, then nods, because he dislikes losing to men more than losing to gods. Around them, shoulders loosen without quite relaxing. A vote would cut the camp down the middle before the city even exists. Everyone feels that truth like a stone in the shoe. Divine judgment seems softer, though it rarely arrives with useful instructions. You have seen many quarrels settled by older people, fuller tables, or simple tiredness. This quarrel asks for birds. It is, you realize, the first reality show with no scrolling and very poor seating. The idea spreads through the band like warmth moving back into cold hands. Men repeat it to each other with growing confidence. Birds will decide. The hills will not have to take insults personally. Already people begin discussing signs they have barely seen and rules they have not yet agreed on. How many birds count? Which kind matters? Whether first sight or most sight wins. Certainty comes cheaply to hungry men. Titus says he has always trusted the gods above ordinary opinion. He says it loudly beside Romulus, where trust can be overheard by useful ears. Remus rolls his eyes and asks which gods he means. Titus answers all of them, which is a safe number when detail might trap you. Faustulus offers him more bread again. It is hard to tell whether this is charity or a method of keeping him chewing. The camp begins to tidy itself for holiness in a practical village way. Bowls are rinsed, ashes are banked, cloaks are shaken and slung straight. Someone combs fingers through his hair and calls it ceremony. You help carry a jar toward the shade and feel the cool damp on its neck. The clay leaves grit on your palms. Nearby, a kid goat noses a dropped leak and decides against it. Romulus says the gods will favor the higher place because height suits them better. He glances upward as if checking whether heaven appreciates the compliment. The sky stays politely blank. Remus says gods also like people who can reach food without spraining an ankle. He says this while brushing dust from his knees. Several men laugh into their hands, then study the ground. You notice how both brothers keep making cities out of gestures before any stake is cut. One holds his hand high and narrow. One spreads both palms wide. Even their shadows argue on the grass. The smell of warm wool rises as people pull on cloaks against the fading chill. Leather ties squeak. A bronze pin flashes and is gone. Simple things keep happening while history clears its throat. Faustulus counts heads as if hills can misplace grown men like sheep in brush. He sends one boy for more water. He sends another for a longer staff. Order comforts him even when it fails. Akka says if the gods choose badly, they will still need a spring and a ditch. She says it flatly, You admire her faith in facts. Facts are her household gods, and they never wander. No one argues with her now, because everyone is busy respecting heaven in a hurry. This is one of heaven's little advantages. It enters a dispute just when practical women become impossible to ignore. You look from the Palatine to the Aventine again and feel the pull of both. Height promises command. Breadth promises comfort. One sounds like a future told by a trumpet. One sounds like stew. Stew is not a small argument where you come from. You've followed the twins long enough to know grand plans still need onions, lentils, salt, and someone remembering the pot. The brothers finally stop circling each other with words and begin speaking to the band instead. That feels worse in a quiet way. A private quarrel can cool. An audience keeps coals alive. Romulus asks who wants a sight no man can surprise from below. Several hands lift. Remus asks who wants fields children can walk before dawn without climbing half the sky. Several other hands lift. There it is. The line appears in the air and not yet on the ground. You feel the band lean apart by inches. No one likes the feeling. Everyone pretends this is still ordinary discussion. Faustulus clears his throat with the sound of an old gate and says the Dodds then. He says it as if announcing blankets before cold weather. Useful, not thrilling. That helps everyone obey. A few men nod too eagerly, relieved to be loyal without choosing between faces. Others nod slowly, because gods are harder to flatter afterward. Still, no one proposes counting heads now. Birds are safer than numbers. You help stamp out a wandering spark near the grass edge with your sandal heel. The ash smears gray across the leather. Little jobs feel soothing when bigger thoughts pass overhead like weather. Someone asks which hill each brother will watch from, and the answer arrives at once. Romulus will take the Palatine. Even compromise now wears matching cloaks and separate paths. The choice pleases everyone because it lets each hill keep its own champion and pride. It also pleases the hills, if hills enjoy being courted. You decide they probably do, in their stony way. Titus immediately says he knew this arrangement made the most sense from the start. Nobody bothers asking which start he means. His memory is a blanket woven fresh for every cold moment. Remus gathers a few followers with a nod and a look toward the lower slope. Romulus gathers others with sheer certainty. You stand where you are a moment longer and feel both invitations like hands. Faustulus comes to your side and presses yet another piece of bread into your palm. He does this in times of sorrow, uncertainty, weather, and mild boredom. Bread is his answer to history. You ask softly which hill he would choose if anyone foolishly asked him. He says he would choose the hill with fewer speeches and a decent spring. Then he shrugs and says no such hill exists. Akka passes by carrying the water jar again, still unimpressed by destiny and its sandals. She says if the birds choose the dry hill, everyone will remember her by midsummer. She is not threatening. She is forecasting. You watch her go and think that cities are often born from great claims in small buckets. Men speak of omens, women count jars. The jars usually win in the end, though songs prefer omens. Soon the camp thins into two slow streams over dew-wet grass, one upward, one lower. You stay with the middle for now, because middle ground still exists for another hour. Behind you the hearth smoke rises straight at last, as if even the wind prefers not to choose. Ahead each brother climbs toward his answer, and you listen for wings. There is no verdict yet. There is only cool air, damp sandals, and the strange comfort of delaying a hard choice by asking birds to do the paperwork for heaven. You stand in the gray hour before dawn, with river mud and wild thyme moving on the breeze. Below you the Tiber slides through mist like a strip of dull silver. Around you, rough hearths glow amber beside wattle and daub shelters. Woolen blankets lie in rumpled heaps on the grass, still holding the shape of sleeping bodies. You have followed the twins since the Alban Hills, and your feet know their pace by heart. You know which one wakes first when the fire dies. You know which one pulls a cloak close and stares at the ground before speaking. This morning, both are awake early, and neither wastes words. The camp sounds smaller than usual. You hear a pot lid settle on stone. You hear a goat cough from its tether. You hear birds begin before the people do, with thin notes from the scrub above the path. Today everyone pretends to be calm about birds. That is the strange comfort of ancient life. You can be deciding where a city belongs, and still begin by checking whether the wash bowl is clean. The method has been settled at last. No one can agree on walls or gates, or where to drive the first stake, so the twins agree to ask the sky. It is a serious plan, though it has the shape of a village argument that has drifted upward. You have seen people trust birds your whole life. You watch swallows skim low before rain. You watch crows rise early when scraps appear. You watch kites circle where hot air climbs from rock and dust. So augury does not feel silly at first touch. It feels like an old habit made formal. Birds move between earth and sky, and that alone gives them a useful dignity. They seem close enough to people to be seen, and close enough to the gods to carry news. You hear older men explain it with grave faces and careful hands. A god can send a flash of feeling, and a person may miss it, and everyone can point. In this way, feathers become public policy, which is oddly efficient. You do not need a temple roof for this kind of reading. You need open air and patient eyes. You need the right hill and the right order. You need everyone to agree, at least for one morning, that geese and vultures may know more than builders. Faustulus rubs his beard and looks toward the empty sky. He says nothing yet, though his face says quite a lot. He has the expression of a man reviewing poor plans made by handsome young people. The old shepherd has raised both twins long enough to distrust any idea that arrives with solemn ceremony. He trusts shoes. He trusts soup. He trusts a wall only after rain has tested it twice. Birds to him are best when they keep to their own concerns. Still, he stands with everyone else, because standing is easier than preventing any of this. You stand beside him, and he presses bread into your hand from habit. Then he remembers the fasting rule and takes it back with a sigh. He pats your shoulder as if apology also counts as breakfast. Before the watching can begin, the body must be made ready. That is how the older men put it. You cannot ask clear signs with dirty hands, a full belly, and loose chatter. The gods, like Acca are believed to appreciate basic order. You walk down toward the water while the light grows slowly behind the eastern ridge. The ground is cool under your sandals. Dew darkens the hem of your tunic. Thorn branches catch at your wool cloak and let go in little scratches. The wash place is only a shallow reach of water near reeds and smooth stones. You kneel there with the others. You scoop water over your face and wrists. You suck in your breath because the river has kept the nights cold. The water smells of silt and wet grass. It leaves your skin tight and awake. It beads in the hair on your arms. It runs brown for a moment where dust leaves your ankles. Remus washes briskly and stands first. Romulus stays kneeling a little longer, as if cold water might wash thought into shape. You dry your hands on clean wool. Nearby, one of the younger men shakes droplets from his ears like a dog, and receives 3 stern looks at once. Silence matters now, and people remember this in uneven ways. One man tries to whisper a joke and thinks better of it halfway through. Another clears his throat and looks guilty, as though coughing might insult Jupiter personally. You know the rule because it has been repeated since first light. No idle talk, no muttering, no unlucky words that might bend a good sign crooked. The air itself feels buttoned up. Fasting proves harder than silence for most of the camp. The smell from the cook fire still hangs in the shelters. Lentils were soaked last night. A strip of onion waits on a board. Someone has even picked wild herbs, which feels almost rude under the circumstances. Acca appears with a water jar on one hip and a stare sharpened by practical disappointment. She asks in a voice low enough to count as nearly respectful, whether any god intends to help carry water. She asks who thought fasting in warm weather was wise. She asks whether anyone has considered drainage on either hill. No one answers her, because silence is required, and also because she is plainly right. She clicks her tongue and sets the jar down by the hearth. You can tell by her face that divine birds are welcome to vote, but they will not be excused from basic site planning. Faustulus hears her and lifts both hands a little. It is his way of admitting defeat without wasting energy. Then he wraps a cloak more firmly around one of the twins' shoulders, because someone must still be sensible. The twins dress for ritual with more care than for travel. You watch them smooth the folds of clean wool. You watch them tighten belts and settle hems above the ankle. Dust still finds them at once, because dust is a devoted servant, and never misses a gathering. You check your own tunic and feel suddenly aware of every loose thread. Your fingers smell faintly of river water and lanolin. Your stomach feels hollow and bright. Hunger sharpens the edges of small things, including the crack in a cup and the scrape of leather on stone. A little smoke rises from juniper laid on the coals. The smell is dry and resinous. It drifts through the camp and clings to wool. You stand in it for a moment and feel almost polished. The rule of silence settles fully now. People point instead of speaking. They pass bowls and staffs with careful nods. Even Titus, who usually fills every pause with his own importance, becomes a man of gestures and eyebrows. He lasts a very short time. Soon he leans toward whoever stands nearest power at that exact moment, and mouths a suggestion no one asked for. Then he notices which twin is watching him and drifts 2 paces the other way. He has a gift for standing slightly too close to the likely future. Faustulus watches Titus shuffle between camps and breathes through his nose. His look says this too began in infancy and has only become taller. Then he glances upward and murmurs, just loud enough for you, that being raised by a wolf explains many management problems. You nearly laugh, which feels dangerous under a silence rule. Instead, you lower your eyes and pretend to study the dirt. A little crescent of mud dries on your heel. An ant climbs over it with steady purpose. When enough washing, waiting, and not eating have been achieved, the sky itself must be measured. That sounds grand, and in practice it means men squinting upward with staffs, trying to give order to empty air. You have seen sheep sorted with less ceremony. Still, the moment has its own calm weight. The eastern light has moved from gray to pearl. Thin cloud trails lie high and quiet. Above the hills, the open sky looks wide enough to hold every plan and every mistake. An augur does not watch all of heaven at once. He marks out a chosen space. He names a piece of sky and treats it as a room with proper edges. Inside that room, the birds will matter. You hear the word templum spoken softly. It does not mean a stone building here. It means a framed part of the world. It means, in effect, that you cut a clean window out of the day and promise to look only there. A crooked staff is raised toward the horizon. The augur turns carefully and fixes the lines by direction. South and north matter. Left and right matter. A bird crossing one side means one thing, and the other side means another. You follow the motion with your own head until your neck begins to ache. It is oddly soothing to watch a rectangle imagined into being. No rope hangs in the air. No beam is set in place. Yet everyone begins behaving as if a quiet doorway has appeared above the hill. On the Palatine, the chosen sky is marked first. You stand where the slope lifts toward scrub and pale stone. You smell warm earth waking under the sun. You see larks flicker low over grass and get ignored because they have not entered the proper field. On the Aventine, another sacred frame is marked in answer. You walk the path with the second group and feel dust puff around your ankles. The hill carries a broader view of river bend and distant ground. It is the oldest recorded argument between roommates about which side gets the better view, though the wardrobe discussion will later prove much less important. Acca Laurentius snorts when someone praises the view too warmly. She says a fine view does not fetch water. She says a hill can look noble and still flood at the bottom after hard rain. You notice several men nod at once and then pretend they have not. The sacred spaces in the sky now hang over both hills like invisible woven cloth. Each side treats its own opening with respect. Men step lightly, hands lower. Eyes keep lifting and returning, as if checking whether the gods have noticed that the appointment has begun. You find there is a special tiredness in staring upward while saying nothing. Your brow tightens against the light. Your jaw rests slightly open. The world becomes a set of simple things, including wind, cloud edge, and the very important question of whether that distant speck is a bird or dust in your eye. By now, the whole business feels like the first reality contest anyone has ever staged. 2 brothers take separate hills. Each has followers waiting for signs. Everyone stares at the sky for updates, refreshing nothing because scrolling has not yet been invented. The day lengthens, and the heat begins to settle into the stones. A sandal strap rubs your instep. Sweat gathers under your belt. One fly investigates your shoulder with the dedication of a tax collector. Romulus prepares to keep watch from the Palatine as the sun begins to lower. That hill catches the light in long slanting bands. The scrub glows dusty green. The rough ground shows old tracks, broken stems, and places where stones have been shifted by many feet. You go there with him and help clear the watching place. You move a basket aside. You kick loose pebbles from the sitting ground. You spread a folded cloak over a flat rock, so the watcher does not spend the holy hour wincing at his own backside. Romulus stands within the marked space and lifts his chin. He is not smiling now. His hands rest still at his sides. The lowering sun catches the bridge of his nose and the edge of his cheek, making him look briefly like a coin not yet struck. Faustulus checks the cloak on his shoulders, and then checks it again. He never trusts whether to respect ambition. He also slips a water skin near the rock, because ritual dignity dries out quickly in real heat. Then, you make your way toward the Aventine, where Remus settles in his own place. The path dips and rises through low brush. Your calves feel the climb. Grass seeds catch in your socks, and one stubborn thorn rides home in your hem. The Aventine feels wider when you reach it. The breeze comes easier there. The river smell rises stronger. The view opens over fields, smoke threads, and the long water turning under late light. Remus lowers himself onto a cloak spread near the watching line. He sits with one knee drawn up and one hand on the ground. He looks as if he would rather already know the answer and get on with building something. Waiting does not flatter him. You set a small stone by the edge of his cloak to stop it lifting in the wind. It is the kind of useful task that makes a body happy. The stone is warm from the day. The wool is rough under your fingers. Titus appears at the edge of the Aventine party and makes a show of loyalty. He nods too hard at Remus. He stands close enough to seem chosen. Then he spots movement on the Palatine and angles his body in a manner that keeps future options pleasantly open. You have known dogs less transparent than Titus. Still, every gathering seems to require one such man, as if history dislikes an empty corner. He is never absent where a winner may soon be standing. The rule of silence returns with evening seriousness. The talking that had crept back during walking now drops away again. Even the usual camp noises feel softer. A bowl set down on stone sounds like a thought, rather than a sound. You sit a little behind the watcher and fold your hands over your knees. The wool at your elbows smells of sun and sheep. A bit of dry thyme crushes under your heel. Somewhere behind you, someone swallows hard enough for 3 people to hear. Now the birds truly matter. A small flock crossing outside the sacred frame earns no reaction. A single dark shape entering the chosen space makes every back straighten. You feel each movement in the camp before you see it in the sky. This is the strange genius of augury. It turns waiting into work. It gives shape to uncertainty. It lets a whole crowd sit under open heaven and call that stillness a method. You understand why people trust it, even while part of you remains a shepherd among practical things. Sheep do not care about omens. They care about grass and shade. Yet even you have stood in weather enough to know that the sky often speaks before the ground admits anything. The sun lowers further, and gold moves along the ridges. Shadows thicken under shrubs. The Tiber loses its silver and takes on a muted brown-green hush. Smoke from hearths below begins to lie flatter in the cooling air. Faustulus eases himself down beside you, with the sound of old knees discussing policy. He keeps his voice to a murmur that barely troubles the silence. He says, to no one in particular, that bird-watching seems an uncertain foundation for urban planning. Then he adds that he has seen sheds sited with firmer method. You look at him, and he shrugs one shoulder. He is not mocking the gods. He is simply a man who would prefer survey pegs and drainage ditches. If a city must begin, he would like it to begin with dry feet. Acalarentia, somewhere behind, gives a low hum that means agreement. You do not turn to see her face. You do not need to. You can hear in that one sound a full lecture about wells, waste pits, and soup done properly before nightfall. The waiting stretches without becoming sharp. That is the comfort of ritual. You know what counts. You know where to look. The rules hold everyone gently in place, like woven bands around a load on a mule. Your hunger has become soft by now. It sits quietly under your ribs like a folded cloth. You start to imagine the evening meal with unreasonable tenderness. Lentils seem noble, onion seems extravagant, even coarse bread begins to glow in memory. A bird cries from somewhere beyond the marked sky, and no one moves. Another shape drifts high at the edge of sight. You narrow your eyes until the world becomes light and shadow and patient guessing. The camp holds itself together by not speaking. Faustulus slips his hand into his pouch and touches another piece of bread, then sighs again. He cannot help it. He is made to feed people. Even at sacred moments he remains half foster father and half exhausted steward of impossible boys. You think of the twins as infants for a moment, because everyone does when they become difficult. You think of stories repeated over fires until they sound like household facts. The basket, the river, the wolf. The way every strange habit still gets blamed on early wolf care, which saves time and many explanations. The sky above the Aventine deepens toward evening blue. The sacred rectangle feels almost visible now because everyone believes in its edges so firmly. You could nearly hang a curtain on it and call it a room. Across the distance, the Palatine holds its own quiet frame. You can imagine Romulus there without seeing him clearly. You can imagine his stillness, his watchers, and the same ache in their necks. The two hills face each other like brothers refusing to share a blanket. For all the ceremony, the mood remains oddly domestic. One man shifts because his foot has gone numb. Another carefully brushes burrs from his hem. Someone in the rear tries to suppress a sneeze and looks afterward as if he has personally offended heaven. The first stars are not yet ready, and the day has not fully left. You stay where you are. Your hands rest warm against your knees. Above you, the framed sky waits to be read, and all of you wait with it, quiet as wool in a chest. You sit close to the last good heat of the fire, with your knees under a woolen blanket. The embers breathe a soft amber light across rough hands, clay cups, and bundles of spears laid harmlessly aside. Above you, the hilltop camp holds its breath in the dark before dawn. Wattle walls show as low shadows, and the thatch edges catch a little starlight. The breeze comes up from the Tiber with river mud and wild thyme together. It is a smell both fresh and earthy, like wet ground wearing perfume made by goats. You have followed the twins since the Alban Hills, and you know their moods by footstep and cough. Tonight even they are quieter than usual, because birds are meant to notice stillness, not chatter. That is the rule everyone repeats, though each man says it as if he discovered it himself. The gods, you are told, prefer a calm receiver, much like a skittish sheep prefers a calm hand. So you do what shepherds already know how to do. You settle your weight evenly, rest your palms on your knees, and let your breathing match the dark. You do not chase every thought that wanders through your head. You let it pass like a dog trotting behind the flock, noticed, accepted, and not invited onto your lap. Around the fire, the others attempt the same noble stillness with mixed success. One man scratches his ankle, another clears his throat, and a third rearranges his cloak for the 7th time. Faustulus gives them all the look he usually reserves for broken fence posts and preventable weather. It is the expression of a man who has waited years for things to go wrong and brought bread anyway. He presses a crust into your hand without pausing his muttering. You eat it gratefully, because worry sounds better when someone has made sure you are not hungry. He glances toward the separate watching places on the hills and sighs through his nose. Well, they were raised by a wolf, he says softly, as if that explains every difficult choice ever made. It explains rather a lot, if you are honest. It explains climbing where no one should climb, arguing about nothing with great dignity, and treating a hillside as a personal challenge. The fire settles lower, and the sparks rise only a little way before vanishing. In the dark beyond, the camp seems to widen, because sound carries farther when eyes can do less work. You hear a low murmur from the other cluster of followers on the neighboring height. Then even that fades, and the valley begins to speak in its own patient voice. First comes the river, steady and full below the slopes. It does not roar tonight, but rushes over stones with the sound of cloth being shaken out. Then an owl calls from somewhere near the bank trees. Its note hangs in the air a moment, neat and round, before another owl answers farther off. The riverbank poplars creak as the breeze moves through them. Their trunks complain like old cartwheels, though no cart has business wandering there at this hour. You can picture the black water without seeing it clearly. You know the bends, the reeds, the muddy places where sandals vanish, and the shallows where cattle drink at noon. Now and then a goat shifts in sleep near one shelter wall. A tether rope rubs wood with a dry, gentle rasp that somehow makes the silence feel deeper. Someone beside you leans close and whispers that the owls must mean something. You whisper back that tonight everything means something, including how cold his feet probably are. He gives a sleepy snort and wraps his cloak tighter around his legs. The joke is mild, which is best, because laughter tonight would feel too bright. The watching itself has a shake to it, and you settle into that shape. You keep your eyes open, your body quiet, and your thoughts trimmed back like thorny brush. No one says this part loudly, but everyone knows it. A sign is not a pebble you grab from the ground, but a thing you must be ready to receive. So you clear space inside yourself as carefully as clearing ash from a hearth. You let old arguments go dim, and you set aside tomorrow's chores before they start knocking. You do not think about which hill has the finer view for very long. At heart, it is only the oldest roommate quarrel anyone has ever staged on a skyline, though with worse consequences than a smaller sleeping corner. The stars wheel overhead with no concern for human arrangements. They cross above both camps equally and leave both parties convinced the heavens favor them personally. From the farther dark, a few late words drift up, then stop. Even the men most eager to be important seem subdued now, perhaps because the sky makes everyone look smaller. You pull the blanket higher over your shoulders and feel the lanolin still in the wool. It smells faintly of sheep and smoke, which is as close to ceremony as most shepherds ever need. A little while later, Laurentia appears from the darkness as steadily as the moon would, if the moon carried food. She moves uphill with a basket on one arm and practical judgment on the other. She does not care for dramatic waiting on an empty stomach. In her world, omens may descend from heaven, but supper still requires olives, bread, and a sensible amount of cheese. She stops first with your group and passes things out in order. A heel of bread for you, 3 wrinkled olives, and a pinch of salt wrapped in a leaf. She asks who has had water and who is pretending not to be thirsty. No one fools her, because she has spent years detecting lies about chores, coughs, and lost sandals. Then she asks whether anyone has checked the clay jar near the hearthstones. The answer is vague enough that her silence becomes its own lecture. You drink when told, because she is always right about such things. Even in darkness, she somehow sees dry lips, poor planning, and a foolish lack of drainage. When she turns toward the path between the hills, her sandals find every safe place by habit. The basket rests against her hip, and the little bronze pin at her shoulder catches firelight once. You watch her descend and climb again toward the other watchers. She worries over both boys with equal thoroughness, though she would never call them boys to their faces tonight. If one camp has enough bread, she wonders whether the other has enough. If one fire burns too low, she worries about the second one before the ash has settled. It is a kind of fairness that has nothing to do with lofty ideals. It is built from blankets, onions, spare cups, and the permanent suspicion that men forget obvious things. Faustulus watches her route with the tired respect of a man who knows who truly keeps a household standing. He mutters that omens are fine, but someone still has to remember breakfast. You hear him add, almost fondly, that the gods themselves would be in disorder without Akka checking the water jars. It sounds less like blasphemy than plain observation. A runner from the other side appears briefly on the path, then stops short before speaking. Even messages seem embarrassed to interrupt the quiet required for proper bird business. The man only asks for another handful of olives and a strip of dried figs. Akka gives him both and tells him to stop standing in the dew if he values his joints. He nods like a scolded son and shuffles off. You suspect half the hills obey her more readily than they obey sacred custom. The night grows colder in the slow, polite way that feels almost personal. It touches your nose first, then your fingers, then slips under the edge of your cloak. You rub your thumb across the seam of the blanket to stay awake without fidgeting. The wool is rough in one place and softer in another, where years have worn it smooth. The embers flatten into a red bed with a skin of gray ash. Now and then a knot in a half-burned branch gives a little click, like a tiny door closing. You listen harder, because there is less to see. The river keeps rushing below, and the owls trade their patient remarks across the valley like night watchmen with feathers. Somewhere near the slope, A small animal rustles through dry grass. Everyone ignores it with great discipline, which is easy when it is probably only something no bigger than stew. The stillness required for augury is not the stillness of statues. It is the stillness of people who notice each tiny sound and do not insist on adding their own. That takes practice, though no one admits it. Shepherds learn from long hours with flocks, and old men learn from sitting until younger men tire first. You feel the mind trying its old tricks anyway. It offers memories, worries, and the sharp urge to stand up for no reason at all. So you let your gaze rest on one pale stone near the fire ring. You breathe in river damp, breathe out warm bread, and think of nothing grander than morning. This is what the watchers are told to do before signs appear. A cluttered mind receives heaven badly, like a basket with holes, or Titus receiving good advice. Titus is somewhere near the center of the camp, standing a touch too near whichever man seems confident. Even in darkness, he manages the posture of someone agreeing in advance with future success. He has begun speaking of likely outcomes in a loud whisper. It is a useful talent if your trade is always having support in the winter. No one bothers to answer him. The fire gives him the same amount of warmth it gives everyone else, which must feel disappointingly democratic. Across the slope, a dog lifts its head and settles again. The stars continue their slow turning, and the black edge of the eastern land softens by a finger's width. It is not dawn yet, but the dark loosens a little around the hills. The camp shapes become less guessed and more seen, with basket rims, square shafts, and folded cloaks, returning gently to the world. You can make out the line of the scrub on the ridge now. Its leaves hold the night damp, and when the breeze moves them, they give a faint silver look. Faustulus stoops to stir the embers and adds only one small stick. He treats the fire like a child who must not be encouraged into noisy behavior. He glances at the paling east and rolls his shoulders under his cloak. "Here comes the important part," he murmurs, which is as close as he gets to ceremony. Then he pushes another bit of bread into your hand because importance, in his view, is best faced while chewing. It is impossible not to trust a man who prepares for destiny with crusts. The first birds of ordinary morning begin before the birds of omen show themselves. Small chirps start in the scrub, tentative at first, as if the world is clearing its throat. That sound changes the air more than the light does, but arranged towards something, like a pot beginning to think about boiling. You rise carefully and stamp your feet once in the grass, without much noise. Dew wets the hem of your tunic, and the cold reaches your ankles with brisk enthusiasm. From the other hill, you see figures standing at their watching place in patient outline. One shape lifts an arm, then lowers it, perhaps only pointing at a cloud that is not there. It strikes you again how strange and solemn this all is. Two men on separate heights, watching birds, while whole bands wait for results, is in truth the first reality contest Rome ever invents, only with less shouting and absolutely no scrolling. The followers wait with the same hungry focus such things always inspire. They stare at the sky, as if refreshing it might help, though the heavens stubbornly refuse to update on command. Acca Laurentia returns just before the critical hour and checks your side once more. She adjusts one man's cloak at the shoulder and hands another a cup before he can decline. She asks whether anyone has remembered the morning water for later cooking. Nobody has, which pleases her not at all and surprises nobody. Then she looks toward the east, judges the light, and narrows her eyes. She has no special awe for augury, but she respects timetables, and dawn has finally kept its appointment. You feel the old teachings settle in your chest as the sky lightens. Empty your mind, open your eyes, and do not confuse wishing with seeing. It sounds simple, because the best rules often do. It is also difficult because people are full of wishes, especially when hills and futures are involved. So you make yourself plain inside. You let your loyalty be steady, your hopes be quiet, and your attention stand ready like a clean bowl. The eastern horizon takes on a thin pale gold, almost too soft to name at first. It lies behind the dark ridge like honey spread under a closed lid. Then the color grows enough to touch the underside of the higher clouds. Their edges turn from gray to warm straw, and the whole valley seems to wake by degrees. The river changes with the light before the hills do. What was only sound becomes a long dim ribbon, then a moving skin of dull silver below. Mist clings in strips near the lower ground and reed beds. It lies there lazily, as if reluctant to surrender the hour before people become active and demanding. You hear the creak of the riverbank trees more clearly now. In the half-light they look like bent old men stretching stiff backs after a cold sleep. Somewhere behind you, a cooking pot is shifted but not yet used. The scrape of clay on stone feels almost scandalous in the shared hush. No one scolds, because everyone understands accidental noise at daybreak. Still, several heads turn with the grave annoyance reserved for sacred moments in spilled porridge. The watching hour has come in full now, and every face lifts skyward. Even Titus forgets to stand too close to anyone important for several entire breaths. Your own neck grows stiff from looking upward, but you do not lower it much. The birds could appear at any moment, and no one wants to miss heaven making up its mind. The scrub around your ankles smells sharp with crushed thyme and wet dust. A lark rises somewhere lower down, too small and ordinary to settle anything but lovely all the same. You hear someone whisper a count under his breath and stop halfway through. Numbers feel bold in this hush, like sandals on a polished floor. Faustulus folds his arms and says nothing at all for once. That silence from him is almost an omen by itself. Acca stands with her basket now mostly empty except for a heel of bread and 2 olives. She watches the sky with the same expression she uses for uncertain weather and overconfident men. You think that if the gods truly wish to impress her, they should also mention drainage. She would find that a stronger sign than any grand sweep of wings. The pale gold deepens, and the hilltop grass begins to show its true green beneath the dew. Every blade holds a bead of water that catches the new light. Then the first larger shape crosses high above, dark against the brightening east. Every back straightens at once, and the whole camp seems to inhale together. Another follows, then another, riding the morning air with easy circles. Their wings tilt and hold, steady as if the sky itself has grown perches. You feel your own heart move faster, though the morning remains calm. This is the point of long waiting, when stillness finally meets motion. No one speaks above a whisper. Even the river seems farther away for a moment, as if it too has paused to see what the birds decide. Beside you, Faustulus exhales through his nose and reaches for the last crust in Acca's basket. Whatever the gods may intend, he evidently intends that nobody greet it hungry. You stand on the damp grass before sunrise, with thyme on the breeze and river mud under it. Your cloak feels cool on your shoulders, and the wool still holds a little night dew. Below you, the Tiber moves in its slow, dark bend, barely showing itself in the half-light. Around you, the hilltop shelters sit quiet and squat, with their wattle walls and smoky roofs. A few hearths still glow amber in the camps, like patient eyes that never quite close. Someone has left a blanket spread on the grass, and it looks as rumpled as a sheep. You have followed the twins since the Alban Hills, and you know their moods by footsteps. This morning both sets of footsteps sound firm, which is rarely a comfort. Faustulus presses bread into your hand before you can refuse it. He always does this before trouble, as if barley can soften fate. He has the face of a man who expects nonsense before breakfast. He also has a second piece tucked into his belt, ready for whoever forgets to eat next. He looks from one hill to the other and gives his all-tired sigh. You know that sigh well, because it means he has already imagined 3 bad outcomes. Well, he mutters to you, they were raised by a wolf. It is his answer to almost everything, and this morning it fits neatly enough. Acca Laurentius stands by a water jar with her arms folded against the chill. She is not impressed by birds, brothers, or grand ideas before sunrise. She asks whether anyone has checked the spring on the lower slope. She asks who is cooking later, and whether the ground there floods after rain. Nobody answers her properly, which means she is probably the wisest person on either hill. She gives you a look that says, you know this too. The twins have chosen separate heights, which feels both grand and faintly childish. The Palatine rises opposite, and the Aventine waits here under your sandals. At heart, it is the oldest argument between 2 roommates about the better view. The difference is that neither man plans to accept the smaller sleeping space. You shift your weight and watch the eastern sky pale from soot to ash. Birds call from the scrub in quick, thin notes, as if testing the day. The men around you do that quiet pretending to be calm. They clear throats, tug belts, scratch beards, and stare upward with deep official seriousness. No one has anything to refresh with their thumbs, so they refresh the horizon instead. It is ancient Italy's first reality contest, but with more cloaks and less seating. Remus stands a little ahead on the Aventine slope, where the ground falls away toward the valley. His hair lifts in the early wind, and he does not seem cold. You know that look on him. It is the look of a man already halfway into an argument that has not happened yet. He squints into the whitening sky with one hand over his brow. Around him, his followers lean forward too, as if eyesight can be improved by collective hope. A dog somewhere behind you shakes itself and settles down again beside a bundle of reeds. Someone nearby chews the last of an onion and makes the morning smell stronger. Then the birds come. They appear first as dark strokes over the Aventine, broad-winged and slow, catching the new light underneath. 6 vultures wheel above you, with the grave air of creatures who know they are being watched. You count them twice because everyone does. You count on your fingers the second time, though your fingers are already full of breadcrumbs. The men beside you begin murmuring before the birds finish their turn. First is first, one of them says, and that feels pleasingly simple. Remus lifts both arms, and the wool at his wrists flaps in the breeze. He smiles in the sharp, quick way he has when luck arrives on schedule. You hear the case forming around you before the words are fully shaped. The sign came early, so the favor came early, and surely that is the point. A sign that arrives first seems closer to the god's own breath. It feels like the kind of answer even sleepy shepherds can understand. Someone kneels and marks 6 lines in the dust with a stick. He draws them slowly, like a careful clerk inventing paperwork before paper. Faustulus does not kneel or cheer. He bites his bread and watches the Palatine with the expression of a man waiting for the second sandal to drop. Remus calls across the valley, and his voice carries clear in the cold air. He claims the omen, and the hill gives his words a hard, bright echo. A few men clap palms against their tunics because there are no drums ready. One laughs too early, which makes the others glance upward again. You feel the moment tip towards certainty, or what passes for certainty among men watching birds. Your shoulders loosen a little under your cloak. Then the Palatine stirs. Across the open ground, voices rise from Romulus's side, first as a buzz, then as one rough shout. Heads turn so quickly that several hoods slip back at once. You narrow your eyes into the brightening light and see them there at last. 12 vultures sweep over the Palatine in a wider wheel, dark and steady and impossible to ignore. The number lands on the morning like another sunrise. It is larger, heavier, and inconvenient in exactly the right way. Romulus throws up his arm from the far hill, and even at this distance you know the shape of triumph. He stands as if the slope itself has chosen him. The men around him begin counting with both hands and then starting again. 12 has a satisfying abundance to it, even before anyone explains why. Now the air fills with a new rule. Number matters more than timing, several voices insist, because a greater gift is plainly a greater gift. It is hard to argue with more birds when they are still circling overhead. Even your own eyes betray you by admiring the neat excess. Remus answers at once from the Aventine, and Romulus answers at once from the Palatine. Their claims cross above the valley together, twin ropes thrown in opposite directions. You hear one voice saying first, and the other saying more. The words meet somewhere over the scrub and do not shake hands. For a few breaths they shout almost in unison, each certain that the plain truth stands on his own hill. It is strangely tidy, like a song with the wrong harmony. The valley holds both claims at once and refuses to choose. Even the birds seem above the matter, which is rude but very much their style. The followers do what followers always do when certainty splits cleanly in two. They begin speaking louder, as though volume might become wisdom by noon. A man beside you repeats first sign 3 times, each time with more finger wagging. Another answers 12, as if numbers by themselves are a full argument. Soon everyone is improving his own case with hand motions, an old custom, and the tone of an uncle at supper. The dust takes many boot marks and no final answer. Someone from the Palatine side cups his hands and shouts that quantity shows fuller favor. Someone near you shouts back that the gods are punctual and should be respected. It grows oddly domestic in its details. Men point at the sky, then at the ground, then at each other's counting methods. One fellow tries to arrange pebbles in two little groups for proof. Another kicks the pebbles apart with the confidence of a man disproving philosophy. The smell of trampled time rises under all the stamping feet. Smoke from the nearest hearth drifts through the argument and makes several men blink at once. You feel the old familiar ache of standing too long on uneven ground. You also feel that nobody has had enough breakfast for this level of certainty. Faustulus moves through the knot of men with the patient misery of a servant in a storm. He offers bread to one man mid-argument, as if feeding him might lower his opinion. It does not lower the opinion, but it softens the chewing. That is almost the same thing for a short while. He passes you again and adjusts your cloak without asking. Then he mutters that wolf milk may nourish many virtues, but moderation is not usually one of them. Acca Larentia does not even look upward now. She is crouched by a basket, checking a cracked cup and deciding whether it is still useful. When the shouting swells, she straightens and says nobody can drink an omen. She says the spring still matters, and so does drainage, and later so will dinner. Her words float across the fuss like a pot lid set firmly in place. Several men ignore her, which changes nothing about her being right. Titus begins this hour at Remus's shoulder, or near enough to be seen there. He nods solemnly whenever anyone says the first sign has the stronger claim. You have seen him nod this way before. His neck is very loyal to the nearest winning side. When the 12 vultures appear over the Palatine, Titus does not move at once. First he looks thoughtful, which on him has a theatrical quality, like a borrowed cloak. Then he places one hand on his chest and explains to anyone listening that he has always valued completeness. A larger number, he says, reveals deeper favor and broader promise. He says this as if he said it yesterday. He says it loud enough for tomorrow to hear as well. As the dispute thickens, Titus drifts downhill by degrees, then uphill again toward Romulus's side. It is not exactly running, and yet it covers distance with great moral certainty. By the time he reaches the middle space, he has a full speech prepared. You almost admire the preparation, though only almost. He announces that wise men must follow the stronger sign wherever it leads. He says 6 is respectable, but 12 is persuasive in a way the gods surely intend. He says timing may please impatient shepherds, but number satisfies serious founders. This is rich since he was impatient 5 breaths earlier. Men stare at him with open dislike and reluctant interest. Titus thrives in that narrow patch of weather where both can exist together. He keeps going because silence would waste a perfectly good stage. He says he never truly doubted Romulus, though doubt stood beside him all morning, wearing his face. Now he edges slightly too close to whoever holds the better prospect of power. This, too, is one of his oldest and most practiced skills. A follower near you snorts so hard he nearly loses his sandal strap. Another asks whether Titus plans to count birds again if the total changes by afternoon. Titus ignores both comments with admirable discipline. He has chosen his hill, and he now polishes the choice until it shines. Romulus's supporters welcome him with the cautious warmth reserved for useful turncoats. Nobody trusts him deeply, but many enjoy hearing their own view repeated at length. So Titus repeats it at length. He speaks of abundance, fullness, and the obvious plain meaning of 12 broad wings over a chosen hill. Across the valley, Remus's men answer with the same heat and opposite logic. You can almost see the argument wearing 2 different cloaks. First remains first, they insist, because a sign delayed is a sign second. The point seems plain enough that several men say plain while explaining it. You hear old custom invoked by people who disagree on what the old custom is. You hear men who cannot agree on breakfast suddenly become experts in sacred order. The twins themselves keep calling out from their hills, each with his own sharp confidence. Neither voice makes room for the other to exist. Their words carry over broom shrubs and stones, and the thin bleating of a distant goat. The goat sounds like the most sensible witness present. You stand between claims that both feel complete from where they begin. That is the trouble with hilltops and brothers, because each gives a fine view of itself. The sun rises a little higher and turns the rough walls of the shelters pale gold. It catches on clay pots and damp wool and the edges of spear shafts left resting nearby. Nobody has moved on to ordinary work. Sheep wait, fires wait, water waits, and the birds are already somewhere else doing bird things. You become very aware of little matters while great matters stall. Your heel rubs inside your sandal, and a crumb sticks in your beard. A child from the camp wanders too close with a half-plaited cord in his hand. His mother draws him back, then keeps listening while pretending not to. One old man settles on a stone and begins cutting a strip of leather, as if this debate requires a strap by evening. In a way, he may be right. Faustulus eventually rubs both hands over his face and looks at the sky again. "There," he says softly. "I told you the birds would not help." He says it without bitterness. He says it like a man reporting drizzle after seeing clouds all morning. Then, because habit outranks despair, he asks whether you want the other half of his bread. You do, and this feels important. Acca Larentia walks past carrying the water jar herself, because waiting for volunteers has failed. She says a future city can admire itself later, but first it needs somewhere to wash a pot. You suspect that if she were allowed, she would settle the whole matter by asking which hill drains better. You also suspect history would be calmer for it. The men keep sorting the sky into arguments. 6 first becomes a whole school of thought, and 12 later becomes another. It is almost impressive how fast a moment turns into doctrine. You can feel tradition being invented under your nose, one loud opinion at a time. Even later, people will not agree on who truly wins this contest. Some will favor the first sign, and others the fuller count, and both will sound convinced. You can already hear those future voices in the morning racket around you. They are safer voices then, far from the cold grass and the smell of smoke. Storytellers will pass down both versions because both fit too neatly to die. One honors prompt favor, and one honors larger favor, and neither yields kindly. So the dispute begins here and never truly ends. It simply learns to sit indoors and borrow firmer language. For now, you remain on the hill with dew drying on your hem. The brothers still call, the followers still answer, and the valley keeps its own counsel. A sacred city is supposed to begin with signs and order and some tidy sense of agreement. Instead, this one begins like many households begin, with certainty over a boundary and no useful compromise. If anyone had drawn an early bylaw in the dust, it might have helped a little. Then again, the first neighborhood rule here already seems to carry an alarmingly steep fine. You breathe in time, smoke, wool, and the faint wet scent of the river below. The morning has become fully bright, without becoming any clearer. Remus still has his 6, and Romulus still has his 12. Both totals sit in your mind like stones in separate hands. You cannot fit them together without dropping one. That is the whole problem, plain and stubborn. Around you, voices continue, then tire, then rise again in smaller bursts. The day moves on in spite of everyone's excellent reasons. A pot lid rattles near a hearth as someone checks the coals for later cooking. A blanket is shaken out and spread again in a patch of sun. Life keeps making its humble requests while the grand question hangs in the air. Water must be fetched, sandals tied, and bread divided fairly enough. You look from the Aventine to the Palatine and back once more. Each hill seems certain that it has been chosen. In the middle stands the valley, cool and ordinary, with scrub, stones, and no opinion at all. That may be the wisest thing in the whole landscape. Beside you, Faustulus gives a final little grunt and folds his arms inside his cloak. He looks like a man preparing for a long day and several avoidable consequences. Acca Larentia returns with the jar balanced against her hip and asks again about drainage. Nobody answers, which means she will probably be right tomorrow too. And Titus, now planted very near Romulus, continues explaining his loyalty to anyone within earshot. He speaks as if truth has just arrived and borrowed his voice. You listen and count and watch and learn the shape of an old impasse. 6 first over the Aventine, then 12 over the Palatine, and both victories claimed at once. The morning settles around that knot and does not loosen it. From here on, the city's first argument will always keep a corner of the room. The air still tastes of river mud when you climb the Palatine in the gray before sunrise. Wild thyme brushes your ankles. Pre-dawn birds fuss in the scrub. Behind you, rough hearths glow amber beside the wattle and daub huts. You have followed the twins since the Alban Hills. You know their steps by sound. You know which one whistles while thinking and which one speaks before breakfast. This morning, everyone listens for the first clear claim. Blankets still lie rumpled on the grass. Someone has left a wooden bowl upside down beside a heel of cheese. Romulus stands where the ground rises cleanly toward the light. He holds himself very still. That stillness always means he is about to begin something larger than the breakfast fire. His followers gather close. Remus's followers stand a little apart. The distance is small, though everyone pretends it is full of deep meaning. Titus has found a place near Romulus already. He stands just close enough to look useful. He has the bright, alert face of a man smelling tomorrow's supper. No one asks him when that happened. Political loyalty, on this hill, moves faster than morning mist. The bird signs have barely settled in memory, yet Romulus says the gods have chosen. He says it in the tone used for weather and taxes. You hear the claim move through the camp like warm smoke. Some men nod at once, some nod after checking who else is nodding. If the augury contest feels like the world's first reality program, that is because it nearly is. Two brothers on two hills watch birds. Everyone else waits for results with heroic patience. No one can refresh anything, so they simply blink at the sky. Faustulus does not blink much at all. He squints into the dawn with that old, long-suffering look. He has the expression of a man who expected trouble from the cradle onward. He presses a piece of bread into your hand without looking. He presses another into Romulus's hand. Project management remains sacred, even when kingship is under discussion. Eat first, he mutters to nobody and everybody. The gods favor men who do not faint into a ditch. Romulus accepts the bread. Then he lifts his chin and declares the victory settled. The city will rise here, he says, on the Palatine. The words hang in the cool air. They sound larger than the hill itself. Even the men who doubt him enjoy how tidy the sentence is. Remus does not step forward at once. He watches with his arms folded. You know that look well from old grazing disputes and shared blankets. It is the look that means he has already found 3 faults. He will name them in an order designed to irritate. Acca Laurentia arrives with a water jar on one hip. She pauses, takes in the hill, the men, and the large idea. Fine, she says at last. Where is the spring nearest the houses? She asks it as if city founding were mostly a matter of carrying water uphill. In a practical sense, you suspect she is right. No one answers quickly enough. She shifts the jar higher against her side. Her silence after that is pointed and steady, like a wooden spoon set down hard. Romulus begins anyway. He names the boundary of the new city. He speaks of the pomerium as though it already hums in the ground. You stand close enough to hear the roughness in his throat. He has not drunk much water. Kingship apparently dries the mouth. The chosen line waits in bare earth and short grass. Dew darkens the soil. A few white stones poke out like old knuckles. Men fetch the plow from where it has leaned overnight under a hide. The bronze gleams dull in the weak dawn. It smells faintly of old polish and warm hands. The white ox is led forward with patient reluctance. Its hide holds the blue tone of early light. Its breath rises in soft clouds from broad, damp nostrils. You reach to smooth the hair along its shoulder. The coat feels shorter than wool and softer than broom grass. The beast flicks one ear against your wrist. The yoke creaks when they settle it in place. Leather straps rub and tighten. Someone checks the knot twice, because this seems wise and memorable. Faustulus checks it a 3rd time, because he trusts memory less than knots. Well, he says softly, they were raised by a wolf. He uses the line the way other men use prayer. It explains everything and nothing. It also gives him something to mutter while preventing disasters. Romulus takes hold of the plow. The bronze share bites the ground with a dry scrape. Loose dirt crumbles aside in small dark rolls. You walk near enough to smell fresh soil opening. It smells cool, rich, and faintly sweet. Thin roots tug and snap with little hidden sounds. The furrow begins as a line, then it becomes a claim. The hill starts to look different at once, which is one of the oldest tricks in human life. You scratch a mark in earth, and suddenly everyone sees a future kitchen, a doorway, a market, and a tax. Romulus keeps the line slow and steady. He does not hurry the ox. The animal places each hoof carefully, as if it too has opinions about civic order. There is a rule to this work. The plow must not lift from the earth, not once, except where gates will later break the line. You have heard that rule since boyhood. Today it feels heavier. Every hand on the hill seems to lean on it. When the share cuts the sacred line, the city is closed against harm. When the plow lifts, there will be an opening for people, carts, and breath. That is how they explain it to one another in low voices. Walls must be whole. Gates must interrupt them with purpose, not accident. The logic is plain enough to hold in your palm. A wall says no. A gate says, not no, but knock. Romulus reaches the first planned gate and halts the ox. The animal snorts and shakes its head. Tiny drops of foam dot the leather near its mouth. With care, the plow rises, the bronze edge clears the earth by a hand's breadth. No one speaks during that small, clean gap. Then the share lowers again, soil parts once more. The line continues around the hill like a thread pulled through cloth. You watch the furrow turn and bend. It follows the land where the land agrees. Where the hill argues, men shift stones and roots by hand. One boy kneels to pull a stubborn weed from the path. He holds it up with absurd triumph. City founding, you reflect, is often weed management in ceremonial dress. A lark lifts from the grass nearby. Several men glance up at once. Old habits die slowly after an augury contest. Titus glances up too. Then he glances at Romulus to see how the sky should be interpreted today. He has drifted even closer now. If Romulus sneezes, Titus will probably bless the future of Rome. Acca follows the line with narrowed eyes. She watches the slope near the southern side. Rain will run there, she says. You will want a ditch. Romulus nods without turning his head. He looks solemn, which is useful. Acca takes that as partial surrender and allows the ritual to continue. You like her for this. She can stand inside myth and still ask who has planned the drainage. Civilization depends on women asking unpleasantly sensible questions. The furrow circles on. Clods tumble inward from the cut. Men with bare feet nudge them aside so the line stays clear and visible. By now the sun has climbed enough to warm your shoulders. Mist thins above the Tiber. Down below, the river moves with that steady brown patience it always keeps. The hill smells of crushed thyme, oxhide, and opened earth. Somewhere behind you, porridge thickens in a blackened pot. Someone has added onions, and perhaps too many. Your stomach notices this before your mind does. Sacred work improves no one's appetite by reducing it. Faustulus notices your glance and presses more bread into your hand. You begin to suspect he stores loaves and folds of air. He watches Romulus guide the plow. His face softens in a way you do not often see. Pride sits there, though it arrives carrying worry on its back. He raised these boys under a low roof and a louder sky. He patched tunics, counted sheep, and shouted them in from rain. Now one of them draws a city's skin over a hill. It is difficult to know how large that feels. It is also difficult to know whether to smile. The last stretch of furrow approaches the first. Everyone leans a little forward. The line must meet true if the morning is to feel complete. Romulus keeps his hands firm on the plow beam. Soil rasps under bronze. The ox gives one long sigh, deep as a sleeping dog. Then the circle closes. The boundary is whole where it should be whole. It breaks only where gates have been chosen. For a moment the hill grows very quiet. Even the muttering men seem to understand a line has become more than dirt. You look at the gaps and imagine them filled with traffic not yet born. Sandaled feet, laden donkeys, jars of oil, baskets of figs, gossip, smoke, and babies. Walls keep a city safe in the old simple telling. Gates keep it alive. Without a gate, a wall is only a stubborn thought in stone. Faustulus says something much like this, though shorter. If no one can get in, he murmurs, no one can buy cheese. This is not priestly language. Still, it wins several solemn nods. It turns out economics arrives early wherever cities do. The men begin to speak of the wall itself now. Not the grand wall of old age and memory. The first one. The one that can be started before the porridge burns. Stone has been gathered in small heaps nearby. The blocks are pale limestone from the hill and its edges. Their color is close to bone, milk, and dry dust. You crouch beside the nearest stack. The faces are rough under your fingers. Powder clings to your skin in a thin, chalky film. These are not giant heroic blocks. They are manageable pieces, each one awkward and honest. 2 men can lift one if they grunt correctly. The first course will follow the new sacred line. 1 row is enough to begin. No city arrives full-grown, however much men prefer to speak that way later. You help carry a stone to the marked edge. It presses hard into your palms. The corners bite, and the weight settles through your arms into your heels. When you set it down, the sound is small, a dull clack against earth. Yet every nearby head turns, as if thunder has politely cleared its throat. Romulus places the first block with both hands. He adjusts it twice, then once more, because founding gestures must somehow look effortless after several attempts. Titus praises the placement immediately. He praises it with the confidence of a man who discovered perfection 5 breaths ago. I always said this hill had character, he says. You remember very clearly that yesterday he praised a different hill's superior breeze. No one challenges him. This too is part of city building. Memory becomes flexible around fresh power. The stones go down one after another. Men kneel, lift, lower, and nudge. A line of pale blocks takes shape in the brightening day. Dust gathers in the creases of your hands. Sweat runs down your spine under the wool of your tunic. A fly lands on your neck and is brushed away without ceremony. After several stones, the wall exists enough to cast a shadow. The shadow is narrow and faint. It still gives people satisfaction out of proportion to its size. By any honest measure, the wall is modest. It barely clears the knee. A determined goat could consider its options and feel confident. You stand back and look. The line is real. The height is not exactly intimidating. Acca Laurentia also stands back and looks. She says nothing at all. Her silence now deserves its own stool by the fire. She studies the blocks with the face she reserved for undercooked beans and weak plans. No one asks what she thinks. Everyone knows precisely what she thinks. The wall is sacred because it marks what must not be crossed. Its force lives in meaning before it lives in height. That is the official feeling on the hill. It has the tidy certainty of a rule painted by the world's first neighborhood committee. Do not cross this line, everyone says. Respect the boundary, everyone says. The penalty, regrettably, is a little firmer than a stern note about shared pathways. You almost smile at the thought. Even jokes seem to step more carefully around a fresh sacred line. Romulus walks beside the blocks and studies each join. He is not admiring so much as rehearsing belief. If he believes enough, perhaps everyone else will too. This is another old trick in human life. Sometimes it works, because stones are less stubborn than faces. Remus has not come close during the first laying. You feel his absence like a cool patch in sunlight. It does not spoil the morning, though it shapes it. Faustulus sees the same gap. He rubs his thumb along a crack in one limestone block. His mouth folds inward for a breath, then eases again. Quiet pride suits him oddly well. It sits over his usual worry, like a clean cloak over work clothes. Beneath it, the work clothes are still there. You think of the boys as children on the Alban slopes. One chased lambs, the other counted them. Both forgot where they had put their sandals. Now one sets stones for a city wall. Faustulus watches as if memory itself has put on a ceremonial belt. He does not say much. He only checks that the ox has water. He makes sure the men carry in pairs. He hands you another crust, because greatness is hungry work. When Romulus pauses, Faustulus looks at him fully. The look holds pride, fatigue, love, and the deep reserve of a man who expects to be needed after the speech's end. There is something moving in that. Cities begin with claims and furrows. They also begin with old men carrying bread and noticing loose straps. The wall extends a little farther, then a little farther again, single course only, pale stone against brown earth, promise in a very practical form. Children from the camp drift closer now that the danger seems mostly theological. They peer over the blocks as if seeing a toy border in a dusty game. One child steps across and back again before her mother notices. The mother pulls her away by the wrist and murmurs to the gods with embarrassed speed. Acca sees this and clicks her tongue. You see, she says, if it is sacred, make it clearer, or taller. This is as near to blessing as the wall receives from her. Romulus pretends not to hear the second half. You hear it perfectly. A gate gap remains open nearby. You stand within it for a moment and look out toward the river. Wind moves up the slope carrying water smell and reeds. Then you turn and look inward toward the hearth smoke, the huts, the blankets, the bowls, and the men rubbing dust from their hands. This, you think, is why the plow lifted there. A city must breathe both ways, out toward trade and roads, in toward soup and sleep. The thought is simple enough to keep. You will remember it later when people speak grandly. Often the grand truth is only a plain household truth wearing sandals. By late morning the sun has warmed the limestone almost white. The blocks hold heat on their upper faces. The shaded sides stay cool when you touch them. A lizard appears between two stones and vanishes again. Rome, in its earliest stage, already has citizens who keep to themselves. Men stretch aching backs. Someone finally stirs the porridge again. The onion smell thickens and a few herbs go in to improve morale. Romulus stands beside his knee-high wall and looks outward. He has the air of a man seeing towers, temples, laws, and markets, where you still see one careful row. Yet the row matters. It asks to be taken seriously, so everyone does, even while eyeing its very conversational height. Akka gives the wall one last long look. Then she says, "At least the gate is sensible." From her, this is practically a hymn. Faustulus hears it and smiles without showing teeth. You catch that smile and feel a warmth deeper than the sun on stone. He is proud. He is worried. He is already wondering who will repair the first loose block. That may be the truest blessing of all. Not thunder from heaven, not birds stitched neatly across the sky. Just an old shepherd seeing rough work begin and loving it anyway. You stand on the Palatine with dust on your hands and bread in your pocket. The sacred line circles the hill. The first wall barely rises, and still the city has started. From the Palatine slope, you can see the Aventine across the pale valley, still blue with early light. You stand with dust on your shins and a basket of stones near your feet. Wild thyme and river mud drift up together on the breeze. Below, the Tiber moves with its sleepy brown shine. The new wall runs in a modest line along the hilltop. It is more promise than grandeur. You could call it sturdy if you are kind, and hopeful if you are kinder. You have spent the morning carrying stones, then carrying them again because someone changes the line by 2 hands. That someone is usually Romulus. You set one rock down and straighten your back. Your palms feel chalky from lime and grit. Behind you, rough stone hearths still glow amber near the shelters, and a few woolen blankets lie folded on the grass. When you look across the valley, you see Remus standing on the Aventine ridge. At this distance, he is only a dark shape against the growing day. Even so, you know the set of his shoulders. You have watched those shoulders carry lambs, jugs, bundles of wood, and trouble in equal measure. He does not wave. He stands with his weight on one leg and his arms folded. The sun catches the side of his face. His gaze stays fixed on the line of stones you are lifting into place. You know that look. You have seen it when a ram pushes at a gate. You have seen it when Faustulus says, in his driest voice, that perhaps today nobody will start a quarrel before breakfast. Faustulus says many things in that voice. He moves along the work line with a crust of bread in one hand and a rolled cloak under his arm. He presses the bread into your hand without even looking. He has the expression of a man who has been quietly expecting this whole venture to go wrong since the twins were infants. Well, he mutters, mostly to the ground, they were raised by a wolf. It is his answer to nearly everything. It covers missing sheep, broken pots, reckless plans, and now city walls. You chew the bread and find that, as usual, he is not exactly wrong. Across the valley, Remus has not moved much. Only his face changes by degrees. At first he looks merely watchful. Then he looks amused in a thin and private way. Then the amusement drains out and something flatter settles in its place. You see him turn his head and study the wall again. He counts its bends, perhaps. He judges its height. He watches men walking beside it with baskets, and boys bringing up water skins from the lower spring. Nothing on the Palatine is hidden from the Aventine in this clear morning light. You can see little practical things from far away if you know where to look. A spade rests against a stump near the trench. A dog sleeps beside a pile of reeds. Smoke from a cooking fire blows sideways, then falls low. Remus keeps watching all of it. The old augury contest still hangs around the hills like stale smoke. 2 brothers on 2 heights, both watching birds while everyone else waits for results. It is the first reality show in Italy, only with less scrolling and more sandals. You remember how everyone argued about numbers and order and meaning. You remember how certain each side sounded. You remember how little certainty actually helped. Now the wall gives the argument a body. You kneel to set another stone into the shallow earth. The trench smells damp and sweet, like fresh-cut clay. When you press the rock down, cold mud squeezes around your fingers. Romulus walks the line with a stake in one hand. He checks the course again with that bright, fixed look he gets when a thought becomes a shape outside his head. He says little, but his silence is full of ownership. Across the valley, Remus sees that too. His chin lifts slightly, his mouth flattens. Even from here, you can feel his temper gathering itself. Not hot and wild, but cool and careful, which is sometimes worse. Acca Larentia arrives with a water jar balanced against her hip. She stops, squints at the trench, and asks who has thought about drainage. No one answers at first, because no one has thought about drainage. She clicks her tongue in a way that could mend or end a kingdom. Then, she says the wall is all very sacred and fine, but water still runs downhill. She points with her chin toward a low place where rain will sit. Everyone suddenly studies the ground with deep respect. She is never wrong about such things. You help deepen the shallow side while the sun climbs. Sweat gathers under your tunic. Bits of grass stick to your ankles. The wall remains modest, as if it is trying not to draw attention to itself. This does not help. When you look again, Remus has moved closer to the slope of the Aventine. He is no longer a still mark against the sky. He paces 3 steps one way, then 2 steps back, like a man testing the strength of a thought before using it. The line of his body darkens with purpose. He disappears for a time behind scrub and stone. You tell yourself he has gone to eat, or sleep, or insult somebody else. Yet your stomach tightens around that dry bread. Faustulus notices your glance and follows it. He sighs the sigh of a man who has raised these boys from swaddling cloth to public consequences. He adjusts the cloak over his arm, as though a warm layer can still solve anything. He is coming over, he says. It is not a prophecy so much as weary math. By midday, the stones feel hotter under your hand. Flies circle a bucket where someone rinsed mud from a trowel. A goat wanders too near the reeds and is shooed away with more seriousness than some public meetings receive. Then you see Remus climbing toward the Palatine path. He does not hurry. That is part of the effect. He comes with the calm pace of a man who means to be seen arriving. A few followers drift after him at a respectful distance. They wear the look people wear when they expect either a speech or a mistake. Sometimes with brothers, it is hard to tell those apart. You wipe your hands on your tunic and stand. The hill seems to hold its breath a little, though birds still chatter in the scrub. The wall lies between the twins like a line scratched in wet clay. Remus reaches the work line and stops. Up close he looks sun-browned and tidy despite the climb. Dust clings to the hem of his cloak. A burr has caught in the wool near his knee, and he has not bothered to pull it free. His eyes go first to the trench, then to the stones, then to Romulus. You know that order matters. Romulus stands with one hand on the stake, and one foot braced on a low rock. Fine grit whitens the edge of his sandal strap. He does not smile. Neither brother greets the other with warmth. Neither turns away either. You feel that old twin magnet pull between them, always drawing together, always scraping when they meet. Remus looks at the wall again. He lets the silence stretch long enough to become a tool. Then he asks very mildly whether this is the famous defense of the new city. Remus circles a short section with his hands clasped behind his back. He studies it as if he has come to inspect a sheep pen built by an enthusiastic nephew. He crouches once and taps a stone with 2 fingers. It is low, he says. He does not say it loudly. He says it with care. That somehow carries farther. He asks whether lambs are expected to respect this boundary from a great distance. He asks whether a tired dog might step over it on the way home. You can almost hear the smile he has not fully put on his face. The wall is, to be fair, not enormous. A sacred line has many duties, but towering over the landscape is not yet one of them. The trench is real, the stones are set, the meaning is large. The height is still thinking about it. Acca Larentia snorts softly behind you. She says under her breath that if men spent half as much time on wells as on symbols, everyone would drink better. Then she adds that this corner still needs better drainage, which is somehow still true in the middle of destiny. Remus hears her and gives the faintest nod, almost grateful for practical honesty. Then he looks back at Romulus and resumes his measured work. He asks whether this is a wall or an intention. He asks whether cattle should duck before crossing just in case. There is mild laughter from the edges. It dies quickly. Romulus says the line is sacred. He says the ground has been marked by right and will. He says no one may cross it without breaking more than earth. The words fall hard and clean. Remus tilts his head. He looks at the low stones, as if considering a household shelf. He takes in the trench, the posts, the fresh earth, and the men holding their breath around them. You know that he understands perfectly. That is what makes the air feel colder. You have watched the twins fight as boys, over a knife, a path, a joke, a seat by the fire, and once a bowl of lentils so ordinary that memory itself seems surprised to be keeping it. This feels like all of those corals grown taller and put into public clothes. It is still at heart, brothers arguing about who gets the better room. Only this room is a hill, and the wardrobe problem is much worse. Remus steps closer to the wall. You hear the leather of his sandals scrape on grit. A grass seed clings to his toe strap. He folds his arms again and studies the line from one end to the other, giving the stones the full weight of his disappointment. He says a boundary worth respect should at least slow a man down. Then he pauses. That pause is longer than any speech. You can feel everyone around you lean inward, without moving. Even the goat near the reeds stops chewing for a moment, which feels, frankly, a little theatrical on the goat's part. Faustulus closes his eyes briefly. When he opens them, he looks exactly like a servant who knows the cartwheel is coming off and still reaches for the flour sack before it spills. He shifts the extra cloak from one arm to the other and says nothing at all. Remus places one foot near the trench. His face is calm now. Not angry, not hurried. Calm in the way of someone choosing a word he has already decided to say. He lifts the hem of his cloak with one hand so it will not catch. That small practical gesture makes the whole thing worse. You notice absurd details because your mind wants shelter in them. The edge of the cloth is worn smooth. One stitch near the border has loosened. Dust marks the side of his calf, where he brushed against dry brush on the climb. Then he steps. He does not run. He does not spring like a boy showing off in a field. He crosses with slow, deliberate ease, clearing the low sacred wall as if it is a puddle after light rain. His sandal lands softly on the inner side. For a heartbeat, nobody speaks. The line has been crossed. And the thing that was half idea and half earth is now insulted in full. It is as if someone has walked through the middle of a prayer and sat down in it. You feel your own breath stop high in your chest. Remus turns slightly after the landing. His expression is not wild triumph. It is worse than that. It is contempt made casual, the sort that pretends this took no effort at all. He has not merely crossed. He has shown everyone how easy crossing is. Some men stare at the broken boundary. Some stare at Romulus. One boy still grips a basket handle so hard, his knuckles shine pale beneath the dust. Titus, who began the week loyal to Remus, and the morning loudly neutral, performs a remarkable act of instant spiritual travel. You can almost see him sidle, in his soul, 3 steps closer to Romulus. He only adopts the alert face of a man preparing future explanations about how he always knew which way the wind was blowing. Romulus does not move at first. His stillness is heavier than shouting. His hand tightens on the stake until the tendons stand out at his wrist. The whole hill waits inside that stillness. A sacred boundary has rules now, whether anyone likes it or not. It is the world's first neighborhood bylaw, in a rough and early form. You must not cross this line. The fine for non-compliance is somewhat stronger than a stern note from a committee. Romulus steps forward, his face pale beneath the sun. Dust clings to the sweat at his temple. When he speaks, his voice is low enough that everyone must be quiet to hear it. That is exactly what everyone is. He says the wall is not just stone. He says it is the mark of the city itself. He says any man who treats it as nothing treats the city as nothing. Then he speaks the words that will be repeated long after your own name is gone. So perish anyone who leaps my walls. The sentence lands on the hillside and stays there. It does not sound theatrical. That would almost be easier. It sounds simple, flat, and final, like a door laid carefully into its frame. You feel the words become part of the ground. Once spoken aloud, a curse has a stubborn life. It hangs in the air like smoke and wool. It catches in memory. It makes listeners into keepers whether they consent or not. No one laughs now. No one asks whether the wall is low. Remus stands within the violated line, and for a breath it seems possible that the words might remain only words. You want that ordinary mercy with surprising force. You want someone to cough, or stumble, or ask a foolish question about lunch. No one does. Something passes between the brothers that is older than the wall and bigger than the hill. It carries hurt, pride, challenge, and the hard shine of being seen before others. It is intimate and public all at once. Then the moment closes in the bleak old way such moments do. Men later tell it with different hands and different weapons and different claims. Some say Romulus strikes, some say another follower does it for him. Some prefer a cleaner story than life usually allows. You remember the stillness before the fall more clearly than any blow. You remember how small the wall looks. You remember a lark lifting from the grass at the wrong moment. You remember dust rising around sandals as men flinch without meaning to. You remember Remus no longer standing. The hillside seems to lean away from itself. Nobody rushes in with noble speeches. Nobody arranges the scene into tidy legend while it is still warm. Real people mostly freeze, because their bodies are slow and their minds are slower. You stand with your hands hanging useless by your sides. A smear of dried mud cracks at your knuckle when you flex your fingers. Somewhere behind you, water drips from a jar mouth into the grass. The sound is absurdly clear. Faustulus makes a sound through his nose, not quite a groan and not quite a prayer. Then he moves at last, because he always moves when there's practical work to do, even when practical work has become cruel. The bread he meant to hand someone remains forgotten in his fist. Well, he says faintly, they were raised by a wolf. No one answers him. Acca Laurentia closes her eyes for one brief moment. When she opens them, her face is hard with the knowledge that she was right about the water, the drainage, and the general wisdom of men making sacred plans before noon. She pulls her shawl tighter around her shoulders, though the day is warm. Titus finds something deeply interesting near his own feet. He studies a pebble with such devotion that you would think the gods have written policy on it. He does not meet Remus's followers' eyes. He does not meet Romulus's eyes either. Not yet. This is his great gift. He can stand nearest power while appearing, for a useful minute, to examine dirt. Around you, the followers go entirely still. One man lowers a basket as if he has forgotten how baskets work. Another keeps his mouth open on the edge of a word that never arrives. Even the murmuring camp beyond the hearths seems suddenly farther away. The wall remains where it was. It is still low. It is still uneven in places. A small stone on the north side has slipped slightly from true. Yet now it has what many laws spend years trying to acquire. It has consequence. You look from the stones to Romulus, and then away again. He stands inside the boundary he has defended with words that cannot be called back into his mouth. His jaw is set. His eyes are not soft. Whatever comes after this will have his shape all over it. The city has found its first rule in the hardest possible way. No one crosses this line without changing the world around it. A breeze comes up from the river and brings the smell of wet mud and crushed thyme. It lifts the edge of a blanket near the shelters. It stirs ash in a hearth until a dull red glow shows beneath. The hills, being hills, continue their patient business of holding men and their mistakes. At last a bird calls from the scrub, then another answers. The small sounds of the day return by degrees, careful and uncertain, as if the world itself is trying the air after a storm. You stand among stones, dust, and silence made permanent, and the new city feels suddenly terribly real. You taste chalky dust from the new-cut boundary on the back of your tongue. Wild thyme and river mud drift up from the dark below. The Palatine is still half night. Rough hearths glow amber beside wattle walls and rolled woolen blankets. You stand close enough to see the fresh furrow clearly. The turned earth lies damp and neat like a dark seam. A little wall rises beside it. It is not very high yet. It looks almost modest in the thin light. That is part of the trouble. Small things often look harmless before people decide they are sacred. Romulus moves along the line with a face gone flat and fixed. Remus stands near enough to mock it. Around you, men shift their weight in dry grass. Sandals scrape stone. Someone coughs and then wishes he has not. Faustulus is a few paces back with his usual look of worn prophecy. He presses a piece of bread into your hand, as if disaster should never happen on an empty stomach. His cloak hangs crooked from one shoulder. There is ash on his sleeve. He has clearly been doing everyone else's tasks again. He mutters that this is what comes of raising boys who once drank from a wolf. Like a prayer, he is tired of proving right. Acca Laurentia does not even glance at the sky. She studies the ground instead. Her eyes follow the slope where rain will run when nobody has thought about drainage. She has asked about the water supply since yesterday. She has asked who is cooking tonight. She has asked whether anyone here has ever met a ditch that stays where it is told. Nobody has answered her properly. Nobody ever does at moments like this. That is another old habit of mankind. You remember the birds at dawn and the waiting on separate hills. It still feels like the world's first reality contest, except nobody can refresh anything except their own worry. Now the contest is over. The better view has been chosen. The oldest roommate quarrel in history has reached its truly unhelpful stage. The furrow matters more than the wall itself. You know that much from the way everyone watches it. The plow has cut the line carefully. The soil has been turned inward. The shape of a city has been drawn before the city even knows its own smell. A boundary like this is not just dirt to the people around you. It is promise and rule and warning together. Later Romans speak of the pomerium with grave faces. They treat it as a thing no foot should cross in mockery. Standing here, you can still feel how strange that seems and how serious it is. It is the first neighborhood rule in history, though the fine for crossing it is unpleasantly steep. You look at the low bank and think how easy it would be to step over. That is exactly why the gesture bites so hard. A sacred line only works if everyone agrees not to test it. Remus has never been famous for leaving tests untaken. His mood today has the bright edge of hurt pride. He smiles too much. His laughter lands thin and sharp. You know that look some colder mornings on the Alban Hills. It is the look he wears before proving some point with unnecessary style. Romulus sees it too. His shoulders rise under his rough tunic. The leather tie at his throat has been tugged too tight. Men on both sides wait for someone older to stop this. No older person steps in fast enough. This is how many terrible customs begin. Titus stands already a little nearer to Romulus than he did yesterday. He keeps his chin lifted, in the careful way of a man rehearsing loyalty. If power were a fire, Titus would warm both palms at it. He has the gift of arriving precisely where influence happens to be standing. Remus glances at the wall and the furrow beside it. He says something you cannot fully catch, over a morning breeze and shifting feet. A few men snort despite themselves. A few look at the ground. Akka closes her mouth into a line that means she has lost patience with every living person present. Then Remus moves. It is quick and almost foolishly light. A teasing step becomes a leap, and his foot passes where no foot should pass. For Roman minds that come after this dawn, that step is not a prank. It is sacrilege in plain daylight, though the daylight is only just arriving. You feel the meaning hit the hill before you understand it. Breath catches around you. The whole camp seems to draw inward. One sandal lands in loose soil. The other clears the line. Dust lifts from the furrow and hangs pale in the air. That hanging dust stays in your memory for years. It is soft as flour and just as impossible to gather back. What happens in the next heartbeat never settles into one clean story. Later old men tell it differently beside better walls. Some say Romulus himself strikes the blow. Some say his follower Celer does it in a hot rush of fury. You live close enough to the moment to know how blur works. Shock smears edges. A lifted arm becomes any arm afterward. You see anger move. You hear one sharp cry. You see Remus fold downward where the line and wall meet. That is all you ever trust completely. The rest arrives later with pride and excuses and careful politics. A bronze buckle catches the first true light. A stick or staff comes down too fast to name. Then there is only the fact of one brother on the ground. Nobody rushes into noise after that. The hill does something stranger. It turns still. The birds over the scrub stop for one breath. A goat bell from lower ground sounds suddenly far away and foolish. You hear a hearth crack. You hear someone swallow. You hear the river below carrying on with its own old business. Faustulus makes one rough sound through his nose. It is not quite a word. It is not quite a sob. He still has bread in his hand. Even now he looks like a man trying to keep breakfast from becoming history. Akka moves first, because practical people always do. She goes to Remus with a blanket that had been meant for a cold night. She kneels in the dust without ceremony. Her hands are steady because there is work to do before grief decides what shape it wants. She asks for water in the same tone she uses every day. The question lands oddly in the silence, but it gives human beings something simple to obey. No one argues about omens now. No one mentions birds. No one asks whose hill had the better claim. The holy line has made its point in the hardest possible way. Everyone present understands that much at once. Later, men who love law and order explain the matter with firm Roman logic. A boundary once marked cannot be mocked without cost. They say the city's skin has to be kept whole. They say the leap attacks more than a brother. It attacks the rule itself. You can see how that thought begins here. You can feel it heartening, even before the sun reaches full gold. Romulus stands near the wall he has claimed. He does not look large. He looks suddenly alone. His chest rises once, and then again. Dust darkens the hem of his tunic. His face has gone pale under the first wash of dawn. If he has struck the blow himself, the weight is in his hand. If Celer has done it, the weight still lands squarely at his feet. Founders do not get to borrow clean hands for long. Cities are difficult that way, from the first morning onward. Celer stands off to one side, with a stare too fixed to read. Men glance at him and then away again. A follower can act in rage. A leader can let rage become law. Old stories spend centuries sorting that small difference. You feel no wish to sort it now. The ground under you feels real enough. The smell of crushed time under sandal leather feels painfully real. Titus clears his throat in the thoughtful way of cowards. He takes 2 careful steps closer to Romulus. You can almost watch his opinions changing shape inside his head. They settle quickly into whatever future seems likely to survive breakfast. He murmurs that he always knew the Palatine was the proper choice. He says it loudly enough for half the hill to hear. No one answers him. This is not from respect. It is because silence has become heavier than speech. That silence settles over the Palatine like a second dawn. It has its own color and weight and weather. You feel it in your jaw and shoulders. Men who have slept on bare ground through storms now stand as if a sound might break them. The new city has just taken its first breath. Grief has nowhere clean to go when that happens. There is no old tomb waiting. There is no settled custom for this exact wound. There is only a fresh wall and a brother-shaped absence beside it. Akka folds the blanket with care around what remains of the morning's argument. Her hands are practical because that is kinder than display. Faustulus kneels beside her and looks suddenly old in a way you have not seen before. His beard catches crumbs and dew together. He touches Remus once on the shoulder, as if waking a tired boy. Then he lets his hand rest there, because there is nowhere else for it to go. He says very quietly that the wolf would have managed this better. It is absurd and tender, and almost enough to let you breathe. Akka tells him to hold, the water jar steady. She says it in the tone of a wife who refuses to let sorrow make a mess of basic tasks. The jar is rough clay, and still cool from the night. A damp ring darkens the dust where she sets it down. Nearby, someone has dropped a coil of rope. Someone else has left a wooden bowl half full of barley mash. These small things look suddenly very alive. They are ordinary enough to hurt your heart. The sun climbs slowly, because the sky is rude enough to continue. Light touches the low wall, and then the furrow, and then Romulus's face. He finally speaks. The words come out hoarse and spare. They sound less like triumph than a rule cut into wood. Different tellers keep the sentence in different shapes. The meaning stays the same in every mouth that repeats it. This is what awaits any man who crosses my walls, so may it be for all who do the same. You hear the law become permanent as soon as it is spoken. It settles into the first stones before the mortar of memory has even dried. That is the Roman genius in seed form. A horror happens, and within a breath it is also a precedent. The line is no longer just a line after those words. It is a warning with a brother's shadow attached. Men around you lower their eyes. No one cheers. Even agreement feels too noisy for the hour. Still, you can sense minds adjusting. People begin to understand what sort of city this will be. It will be a place where walls matter, because a body once proved that they must. It will be a place that remembers the cost and calls that remembering strength. Titus nods with grave enthusiasm that appears from nowhere. He says under his breath that firmness is exactly what founders require. He has the expression of a man standing slightly too close to tomorrow. If authority had a smell, he would already be wearing it. You look at him and then at Faustulus and Akka. The difference between ambition and grief could not be clearer if painted on a pot. Faustulus is not thinking about future law codes. He is thinking about the twins as muddy boys racing sheep through gorse. You can see it in the way he rubs his forehead. He is counting old scrapes that ended with soup and scolding instead of legend. Akka is thinking about immediate needs because grief often begins there. She asks who will fetch more water. She asks where shade will fall by midday. She asks for a clean cloth. She is never wrong about what the living still have to do. No one mentions destiny to her now. Destiny is very impressive until someone must wash the bowls. You move because she asks you to move. You bring the cloth, you carry water. Your hands are grateful for ordinary work. The cloth smells faintly of sheep lanolin and wood smoke. The water tastes of cool clay and the river's distant silt. Around you, the camp begins the awkward labor of not collapsing. A pot is lifted from coals. A child somewhere below the slope laughs, without knowing why that sounds strange. That laugh cuts through the hush and then fades. The silence returns not angry now, only fixed. You understand then that it will not leave entirely. It will travel with all of you into later years. Men will speak of this day in marketplaces and courtyards and under winter roofs. Yet, what they carry deepest will be the quiet after. You will remember how the breeze keeps moving the same bent stem of grass. You will remember how no one reaches for the bread. You will remember Romulus, standing with a city at his feet, and no one beside him who can share the name. The hill gives him room enough for power and none for comfort. The name of Rome is very near now. So is the cost folded inside it. From this morning onward, the city and the wound arrive together. They cannot be unmade from each other. That fact does not feel grand where you stand. It feels small and human and hard to look at directly. A smear of ash marks the side of the hearthstone. A fly lands on the rim of the water jar. Sunlight warms the blanket too fast. These are the details the grand poets never linger on. You linger on them because they are true. Later, men in good robes debate whether Romulus strikes or Cellar strikes. They compare sources with great dignity and dry mouths. You suspect none of them ever smell fresh dug earth while speaking. That would improve the debate and probably quiet it. For you, the uncertainty does not weaken the moment. It makes it more human. People rarely remember the exact angle of disaster. They remember the dust and the stillness and the awful change in a familiar face. Romulus turns at last toward the line of huts and hearths. The movement is slow, as if the air itself has thickened. He is no longer one of two in anyone's eyes. Even before the walls rise higher, kingship has settled on him like a heavier cloak. It does not make him warmer. You can see that plainly enough. Faustulus rises with the care of an old shepherd whose knees have opinions. He looks once at Romulus, and once at the earth. Then he sighs the sigh of a man whose worst forecast has finally matured. He says someone should eat before the bread goes hard as stone. The sentence is so ordinary that it nearly undoes you. Akka tells him he may eat when he has found another blanket. Life insists on itself in this rude, practical way. Even founded cities do not exempt anyone from chores. You help lift what must be lifted. You steady the jar. You watch hands that once fed both boys now serve only one future. Nobody says the word murder with any comfort. Nobody says brother without feeling its new weight. Yet the city stands there all the same, in line and idea and law. That is the cold wonder of it. The Palatine keeps the morning, the Tiber keeps moving below. Wild thyme keeps giving off its calm little scent, as if none of this concerns a plant. By full dawn, the sky is clear and almost innocent. Smoke rises straight from the hearths. The first proper day of Rome has begun badly and cannot begin any other way. You stand in that clean light with the others and feel the shape of history turning firm. It is quieter than anyone would expect. The silence remains on the hill, long after voices return. It stays in meals and meetings and winter retellings. It stays whenever a wall is marked. It stays whenever a threshold is crossed with care. It stays whenever someone says the city's name and pauses just a breath too long. And Romulus stands alone with the law he has spoken and the brother he has lost. The city has a founder now, and the founder has a shadow that never leaves. You still hold the pale morning in your mind. You stand again on the hill above the Tiber. The air smells of wild thyme and river mud. The birds begin before the sun does. You remember how everyone grows solemn over something so small and fluttering. Two brothers take two hills. Two sets of followers wait below. The whole thing feels like the first reality show in history, only slower and with much worse seating. You look up so long that your neck grows stiff. You watch the empty sky as if it owes you an answer. Then the birds come at last. They are only birds. They flap and circle and go about their bird business. Yet every face around you tries to turn wing beats into law. You can still feel that strange hush. You can still hear people counting aloud and pretending it settles everything. Titus is already edging toward whichever result looks more useful. He stands just a little too close to confidence itself. He has that special gift for loyalty after the fact. Faustulus, meanwhile, looks like a man who has spent many years expecting exactly this sort of nonsense. He presses bread into your hand anyway. He knows that hungry people make worse choices. He mutters that the twins were raised by a wolf, and that this explains more than anyone likes to admit. You see the fresh cut in the earth. You see the turned soil falling inward. You hear the careful words and the careful steps. A line in the dirt becomes a law before your eyes. It is a sacred boundary, and also the oldest known version of a neighborhood rule about where not to step. Acca Laurentia is not moved by any of this. She wants to know where the water runs in heavy rain. She wants to know who carries water when the jars are empty. She wants to know who is cooking dinner for the men who are very busy making history and very poor at planning supper. She is, as always, entirely right. Even in that solemn hour, with the oxen and the right and the lifted handles of the plow, you can feel her practical thought sitting beside the holiness like a folded cloak. It steadies the scene. It makes the whole thing feel real. A city does not live by omens alone. A city also lives by drainage. Then your thoughts settle on the hardest image of all, and it comes quietly now. You remember the stillness after the shouting has ended. You remember how the day seems to lose color for a little while. You remember Romulus bending over his brother. There is no triumph left in the shape of him then. There is only the heavy work that comes after anger. He buries Remus with the plain care of a man who cannot undo a moment and so must do the next thing well. The lament rises around you in the old way. It is ritual, and it is real grief, and for a little while you cannot tell where one ends and the other begins. Dust falls softly, hands move slowly, voices tremble and settle. The founding is still going on, but grief is inside it now. That is the part you keep returning to. Rome does not arrive clean and shining. Rome arrives with tears wiped by dusty wrists. Rome arrives while a brother is laid in the ground. Then, with evening drawing down, the name is spoken. Rome. It is such a short word for such a long echo. At first it is only a sound on one hill. Then it begins to fit itself to the ground. It settles over the huts and the rough stone hearths. It catches the last light on the scrub grass. It hangs for a moment above the river below. You hear it, and the place changes. Not all at once, not by magic. It changes because people begin acting as if the name is true. The wall is accepted as law now. No one laughs at the boundary any longer. Even the men who muttered before now keep a respectful distance from it. Titus has already found a new posture of deep agreement. He explains loudly that he always knew Romulus was the safer pair of hands. No one seems interested in this remarkable discovery. From that same hour, you can already feel the slower work beginning. This is the part history books rush past, but you do not. You stay for the practical labor. You stay for the patient stacking of one day on another. He is a man who needs places for people to sleep, and rules for people to follow, and some rough order for a crowd that keeps growing. There are places for meetings. There are early customs that will harden into habit. There is a first gathering of elders. There is a king who starts learning that a city is mostly made of listening, counting, assigning, and waiting. There is room on the capital for strangers with nowhere steady to go. Wanderers and runaways drift in. Men without a home are welcomed. Exiles appear. The city opens a rough shelter and calls them in. It is generous, practical, and a little bit like the oldest public sign-up sheet in the world. Rome begins by taking in the unsettled. It begins by giving the homeless hill a name and asking others to share it. In your tired mind, you can already see the long centuries moving slowly outward from that first camp. Not straight roads to every horizon. First comes smoke, fences, muddy paths, storage jars, arguments over grazing, and soot on cooking pots. First come babies bundled in wool. First come old men warming hands over embers. First come prayers said half from faith, and half from habit. First come festivals that carry old memories inside them. The Lupercalia is there in seed already, close to the cave and the she-wolf tale, half sacred rite and half cheerful local tradition that no one fully explains the same way twice. The city will keep doing that. It will turn old fear into custom. It will turn rough beginnings into feast days. It will laugh a little where it once winced. It will carry the memory of a costly first sacrifice and cover it with song, running feet, and the noise of people determined to go on living. That may be the most Roman thing of all. You end where the night ends. The fires sink lower. The rough stone hearths glow amber in the dark. Woolen blankets spread on the grass hold the day's last warmth. Below you the Tiber keeps moving as it always does. It does not pause for omens or kings or mourning. It slips through the darkness with patient sound. You lie there and feel the hill under you. You listen to breath, ash, and water. Somewhere behind your closed eyes, a city has just drawn its first breath too. And now the whole story grows softer at the edges. The night has weight and warmth, and the river below seems to carry the last wakeful thoughts gently away. And somewhere in the dark, Acca Laurentia already knows exactly where the water should run, which means Rome begins with at least one sensible idea. May your dreams be free of arguing brothers and ambiguous bird omens. May your walls always be built just a little too high for anyone to consider leaping. May your birds always fly in formations that leave absolutely no room for interpretation. Thank you for listening. May your thoughts drift as softly as the Tiber, and good night.